Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get started.
Yep, I thought it was a good meeting.
Today, the board is participating in an equity workshop that will be facilitated by NSBA consultant Mary Furtakis, who will join us virtually. We'll now call the equity workshop to order at 1:04 p.m. on March 31st, 2021. Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. Here. District 2, Alexandria Ayala.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill. District 4, Erica Whitfield. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews. District 7, Deborah Robinson.
We have quorum with all 7 board members present. Also joining us is Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, General Counsel Sean Bernard, Inspector General Teresa Michael, and Board Clerk Carol Bass. Senior staff members will join us periodically as directed by the Superintendent. Viewers and listeners can access the meeting today by either watching on Comcast channels 234 and 235, UVerse channel 99, or by using the YouTube link on our webpage at palmbeachschools.org. We also offer a listening-only option, which the public can access by calling 561-357-5900 or toll-free at 1-866-930-7015. The meeting ID is 1-561-880-1124 #. This meeting is being transcribed by a closed captioner, so remember to speak at a reasonable pace. Will everyone please stand for the pledge to be led by Superintendent Fenoy?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one recorded speaker, and I understand we'll hear that speaker prior to beginning the workshop. Mr. Murray, please play the recorded speaker now.
Yes, my name is Carl Muhammad, and I'm calling about the subject matter in which we're hopefully getting ready to discuss, this equity. And I want to say equity, equity, equity. And they say if I say it 3 times, we're more apt to kind of remember it. And to finally see us as Palm Beach County finally reaching into the idea of equity. We're, as the ADOS community, the African American community, we want to be a part of the conversation from the beginning, and we're hoping that we are reached out to, and we possibly might be able to help with some of the new tangible products that we've developed as a result of our relationship with the Palm Beach County School District. Our Third Eye and the Black Educators Caucus and others inside of our community, we're excited about the idea of what you guys are talking about as it relates to the idea of equity. We know that this word has been a troublesome word for the human family here in the United States, but to see Palm Beach County taking the advance movement to go towards the completion of the idea of trying to bring equity into the society, we appreciate that. But we also want to remind you that we, along with Ms. Marcia Andrews, our school board person, and Dr. Fenoy and others, are getting ready to move forward to try to prepare a covert response for the African American community as a result of us being on the bottom rail of the academics inside of Palm Beach County. We're trying to bring some clear, concise information to our community, and we have hopes that everyone that's involved in the Palm Beach County School District would be helpful in trying to bring any kind of thing that you have of good that you have as a product inside of your arsenal. We're asking that you would share that with Ms. Andrews, Dr. Fenoy, so that we could present that to our community and possibly assist you if we should start the next school year here in Palm Beach County. So I want to thank everybody for all of the work that you do, and please be safe. We are expecting another spike inside of the covert, but to all of you that are in love with the idea of trying to prepare our future and the children, we appreciate you, and thank you for your time. Brother Carl, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. And before we get started, I guess we need to wish Mrs. Andrews a happy birthday. Today is your birthday, Mrs.
Absolutely. Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I'll turn the workshop over to Dr. Fenoy and say welcome back to Mrs. Furtakis.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our board, thank you for your participation this afternoon. Today is the second of 3 equity workshops facilitated by our consultant, Ms. Mary Furtakis. Last time when we were around the table on March 9th, we spent a good amount of time discussing the root cause of inequities in Palm Beach County schools. Identifying and clearly articulating why we see disparities in our student achievement data is a critical first step in understanding how we can begin addressing the underlying equity issues. We know we know what is causing the disparity in our system. We saw it for ourselves in the root cause chart compiled by Mayor Foutakis and shared on March the 9th. Now that we know better, or at least have a fundamental understanding of knowing better, it's up to us to do better as a leadership team. By the end of the workshop, today's workshop, Ms. Foutakis has assured me that we will walk away with a working definition of equity. Having a collective understanding of what we mean when we say the word equity is absolutely necessary if we really want to make equity a central tenet of our strategic plan, as the board has asked us to do. I urge members of the board to continue actively participating in the conversation today. My hope is that this workshop will serve as another opportunity for you to have real conversations with each other on topics that matter most to our students and our families. And with that, I will now turn it over to Mrs. Foutakis.
Thank you, Superintendent Fenoy. And it's a pleasure to be with you all again today. And I want to thank your staff and your team for their help in preparing for this and the information that you all received in preparation for our time together. I'd invite Ms. Vicencio to pull up the PowerPoint that we're going to be working from, and we're going to start off with our check-ins and an outline of the agenda so you know what to expect today. And as Dr. Fenoy has said, our task is to have a draft definition of what equity means for Palm Beach County schools by the end of our time together. You have received everything you need to be able to have that conversation and accomplish that task today. And so my job is going to be to facilitate that conversation, and Ms. Vicencio will be taking notes for us on the whiteboard so that you can see as we're drafting things together what this is going to look like. So with that as a preface, could we please pull up the PowerPoint? If you have, I'm not able to see it.
It's up, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Mr. Barbieri, I'm going to be relying on you again in your wonderful way of being able to see everyone and call on folks as we go around. And so I would like to start in with a check-in with everyone. If we could please go around the room, and I'm going to invite you to share a word or a phrase about how you're showing up today. And the reason we're doing this, again, part of the time we're spending together is to model how we do equity well. And part of equity is empathy, and it's seeing each other and what we're bringing into the spaces that we're sharing today. And since we last met, there have been some really disturbing things that have caused harm and a lot of pain for people around this country. And so I would be remiss and it would be very tone deaf of me to not recognize how that might be impacting others as they're coming into this space. For me personally, where I live, the murders in Atlanta of 6 Asian women has elevated the anti-Asian, Asian American, Pacific Islander sentiments that have been long in this country and in my part of the country. We have played a role in exacerbating that with hate crimes. So this is really affecting us, and we're having to have some hard discussions about the impact of that. We've also had the trial for the murder of Mr. Floyd has started, and that is opening up some wounds for people for things that happened a year ago and have been long simmering. And again, part of the work that we do together is to recognize that these types of things do impact people in different ways. And so it's important to just let people know that we see each other. So with that said, I'll start off by saying I'm showing up. I'm grateful to be able to have this time with you and to do work that these incidents I've just mentioned have made it clear are even more important than ever that we'd be focusing on. Mr. Barbieri, I would invite you to please call on your colleagues so we can go around the room.
All right, we'll start this time with Dr. Robinson at the other end. Microphone. Microphone, Dr. Robbins.
There we go. Oh, gosh. Okay, so, I don't know. I guess I'll walk with hopeful.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm showing up today on my birthday. Pretty excited to be celebrating another birthday. But I feel sad for the country. I feel sad when I think about the killings of the Asian Americans and the targeting of them as I listen to the trial of George Floyd. And all of this happened over a $20 bill, and people not being educated and understanding and working together. That it makes me feel distressed that we don't understand one another and we don't try to learn one another. So I'm hopeful that here in Palm Beach County School District that we're going to get closer to one another. The students, the adults, the community, the parents, to understand one another. So if coming on my birthday and continually working on the projects that we've been doing for equity, if we can make it better for everybody in Palm Beach County, across the United States and the world, this is time well spent.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you. I'm actually very engaged. I'm interested. I think that what's going on in the country just means that this work that we're doing is even more important, and we're right on the right page to be talking about this today. So I'm hopeful as always, and I'm very excited to get ready to work. Thank you.
Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, I think the word I would use is supported, because as the leader of an organization of almost 25,000 people of diverse backgrounds, but more importantly, leading an organization where most of the board doesn't look like me, the fact that the conversations being had with me by my board members are so intentional and so respectful around this issue of race and class, and how I sit in the world. So I am so thankful that my board members, especially those that don't look like me, have had the courage to have these intimate conversations around race and its impact on me, but also our organization at large. So I'm very thankful to all of you for being courageous in that regard.
I guess I'm next. I guess, Mr. Fotakis, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for the future of my grandchildren and their peers. It seems like this country is more and more divided every day. I just don't see, I'm starting to feel like there is no solution to the division in this country. It seems people are more polarized than ever, and they're digging in on their different sides, and I just wonder if there's actually any way out of this. So hopefully we'll figure that out together. Ms. Brill.
Okay, now I'm on. So, this year started with anti-Semitic murders up where I grew up, and then it led into a whole lot of murders that shouldn't have happened. I'm listening to the trial right now in tears for George Floyd and for the young people that were there, and my heart's breaking. My heart's breaking for the Asians who are being murdered for no reason whatsoever. But today I show up here hopeful, because with all of that going on, I'm just happy to be a part of us changing the system in Palm Beach County again. As we talked about at the last meeting, I remembered pushing to include students with disabilities in the regular classroom. That was a huge change, and we had encountered huge problems and a pushback. It's going to be even harder now. And so I'm up for the challenge, but I'm thrilled to be a part of doing something for the second time that's really going to help outcomes for our community and give hope for the generations such as Mr. Barbieri's grandchildren. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ayala, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm also a little heavier walking into today than the past, I guess is the best way to put it. Distracted, like Dr. Robinson said, with everything going on. But I want to echo Dr. Fenoy's sentiments on determined to actually put all of this work into action, because I know we can do better in Palm Beach County, and I'm excited to be a part of that positive change in the right direction. And we can only change the part of the world we can impact. So I'm just trying to keep focus on that.
Ms. McQuinn.
I asked Mr. Barbieri if I could go toward the end because I was really very prayerful on the way here that I would be motivated to be engaged. And I am motivated to be engaged. But those feelings, and I wrote down some of your words when Dr. Robinson talked about being distracted. We are over the George Floyd trial and the Asian woman in New York City. And just, I don't know, it's distracting. It's, for my word, it's disheartening. Marcia said, sad. I'm all of those things today. I'm usually upbeat. I'm not. But as I listen to everyone, sometimes you have to get really, really sick to decide to go to the doctor. So that's the attitude I'm going to have today, that we are going to really tackle this and know we have to get better. Thank you.
That's all of us, Ms. Furtakis.
Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate that. And again, hopefully this is something that I would just encourage you to do in the spaces that you occupy, just to recognize that what has been expressed here is what a lot of people are carrying, and the word heavy and heaviness has been coming up a lot in the spaces that I've been in. So it is important to see this, recognize it, and then also realize that you're in the best place you can be right now, which is sitting together and in a moment in time where you can take action to address the things that we're talking about. And this is what leaders do. So I commend you for that. And I'm glad we're at this moment in time that we're having this conversation. So next up on our agenda is to do the land acknowledgement. Again, another practice I would encourage because any equity conversation should be starting with the people who were initially the ones who were the recipients of inequities when Europeans came to this country. And I want to thank Ms. Whitfield at this point. She let me know that there is an additional tribal presence in your school district, which has been acknowledged in the name of one of your schools. And so I appreciate that. And they will be included in my land recognition today. And so this is a good example of when we know better, we can do better. So today I would like to recognize the lands that we are calling in from today, which include the Seminole, the Tequesta, and the Yaga tribes, the Seminole and the Duwamish tribe in Pacific Northwest. The Seminole are a federally recognized tribe. The Tequesta no longer have a presence on these lands, and the Yaga lived along the coastal parts of Martin and Palm Beach counties and have not had a presence on these lands since the 18th century. The Duwamish tribe, where the lands that I am on, they are not a federally recognized tribe, and they walk among us, and the city I was born in is named after their chief, Seattle. I would like to acknowledge these historic and traditional caretakers and stewards of the lands that we currently live on, that we enjoy, and that we have benefited from. Okay, now we're going to go right into our norms. Again, another practice I would encourage for any of your equity conversations. And we'll start off with the Speak Your Truth, which I would encourage all of you to do today, and also to remind us that all perspectives are valid and all perspectives are partial. Once again, all perspectives are valid, all perspectives are partial. Once you've had a chance to speak your truth, it's important to sit back and listen to the other perspectives that are represented in the room. Second is to stay engaged. We've all already covered the fact that we're carrying a lot with us, and hopefully, while that can make things difficult to stay engaged for our time together, hopefully the purpose for which we're engaging will help with that being able to lean in. Number 3, expect to experience discomfort. We are going to have probably a few tough little conversations about what this is going to look like related to equity. And this is good because when we're experiencing discomfort, it means we're in a learning space and we're being presented with something that may challenge our thinking. Be aware of our intent and own our impact. You may intend for something to come across some way, but if it lands on someone with an impact that causes harm, it's important to acknowledge that and recognize that it is a gift when people tell us if the impact of their words has caused harm. because when we know better, we can do better. To accept and expect non-closure is our next one. We are going to leave today with a draft definition. How long that takes will be dependent on this conversation. And if we finish early, then you will have a gift of time. But there will be some other issues that probably come up that we are not going to be able to address today. Those will be parking lotted, and we'll just have to accept that there will be non-closure on some things as we're focusing on the task today, but they will be returned to. And then our last one is to maintain a learner stance and remain open to new thinking. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to remind you where we are on the timeline. Today we are at workshop 2 at the end of March, and we've completed your root cause analysis. We're doing the draft equity definition or statement today, and you can see where that fits in with all the other moving pieces that are going on. This is again, with all of these moving parts, it is critical that the board's role in this is staying on track because there are many other dominoes that are waiting in line for the work that we're doing here today. Next slide, please. And this is just to give you a visual of showing how we are doing our work, and which has been creating a shared knowledge and understanding as a foundation for the board. And now we're honing in to get clarity and focus for the ongoing work around equity in the district, which is going to be including your strategic planning effort. And we are coordinating with Insight to ensure that alignment with board thinking from these equity workshops is incorporated into that strategic planning process and the work that will be going on the district's equity policy. So the board's work today is critical for all of the other pieces that are moving. So when we are done today, I'll say it again, we will have a draft statement of what equity means in Palm Beach County schools. You have all the information you need, and you've had time to reflect on it to be able to complete this task today. And I know you're coming in well prepared for our time together. Next slide, please. Thank you. And at this point, Ms. Villavicencio, I believe, has provided you with the input document from the board pre-work with the information that was sent to me. And it has been categorized in a way to try and encompass what the things that were shared. I have this slide up just as a reference point for you because these were words that came up a lot and that we had a lot of conversation around last time. And everyone is very aware of the challenges with the current culture, with power dynamics, the control, the issues of access and opportunities, the status quo that is in some areas wanting to be maintained, attitudes of the way it's always been done, fear of change, the systems issue, all of these things, we're very well aware of it, and we had a lot of time to share thoughts about that and how that is manifesting itself in your existing system. So today, taking all of that into account and the words and phrases that were offered by your colleagues, we're going to be having a conversation around what you want this to look like. And I'm going to pull a piece of paper here. The first column was words that people had identified and that were coming up for them that they were interested in having them incorporated into any kind of statement that you develop. And the second column was phrases or concepts. And the way I divided this out, some of them are looking at the what, because that is actually your job as a governance body, is to look at the what. And the others on the last page are more operational, and they're the how. So I separated those out because our focus today needs to be on the what, but also wanting to capture those thoughts which will also be shared with Insight, because all of the things that were raised are equity issues, but they are at the how. There would be a how you would be addressing this to make your equity definition or statement become realized as it's implemented. And then the third column were some overall thoughts and concepts that people had shared that they wanted to take into consideration as you're looking at this as an umbrella. So at this point, I'd like to pause just to see if anyone has any questions, since you have received this information this morning about those particular items on the chart that you received.
Board members, any questions? Not at this time, Ms. Patrick.
Okay, great. So at this time then, we're going to dive in, and Ms. Villavicencio has a Google document on the whiteboard that she's going to be putting up, and we're going to start with you all having your generating some ideas or thoughts about either words, phrases, things that are already in here that you would like to put out for consideration as a part of this statement or definition. It's either or. And one thing I should clarify for you is the debate happened early on back in December about whether this was going to be an equity or a racial equity statement. And I would encourage you to be focusing on this as an equity statement, because if you make it a racial equity statement, which you can certainly elaborate on in a policy by the board, but if you focus just on racial equity, then we will have been marginalizing the students that your data is showing you also are experiencing inequities by either disability, by gender, by language, by other marginalized identities. And so I would be encouraging you to be looking at this as an equity statement where you absolutely can lead with race, but in order to be meeting the needs of the marginalized students in your district, which are very clear through your longitudinal data, doing a broader equity statement to ensure they're incorporated would be my recommendation.
Dr. Robinson.
So thank you. So obviously you're the consultant. I'm not particularly interested in the We Are the World equity statement, but you guys can do what you want. I believe the root cause of all of this race-based caste system is racism. Okay, so I have no desire or intention to leave anybody out, but I do believe when you address the root cause, then the other people who have gotten caught up in this racist caste system in this country would benefit as well, as has been shown throughout history, because whenever black folks fought the fight and got whatever was deemed to be a privilege, other groups benefited. So that's my piece, but I also need to go back, and I'm sorry for being late in attending to this, but let me just give you an example. So in the discussion notes for March 9th, it says we need to say black students shouldn't be the only ones with black teachers. All kids should have a diverse teaching force in their school, regardless of the community they are in. Now, I would have to watch the tape, but I'm fairly certain that that was my comment, and I'm fairly certain I didn't use the word diverse, because I don't use such words, right? I'm fairly certain that I said that the studies show that all students, including white students, benefit from having black teachers. So if we're going to talk about equity, let's talk about equity, and let's not use words like diverse when we mean black. Okay, just like in this school system, we talk about the school is very diverse. It could be 95% black, and we call it very diverse. It's not diverse. It's fairly homogeneous black. But so that's part of normalizing white. So, I'm sorry. I'm just, it's time for the rubber to meet the road. I'm ready for it. Let's go.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And as I continually say here each week, we know the areas that we have to work on here in Palm Beach County. And one thing I think we have to do is to eliminate the barriers and create equitable access to education for all students. And that's a big thing if we really mean what we say, because the barriers that are keeping these students from being successful, many times we've created based on saying that we don't have the resources to do what we need to do with the children that need it the most. So I think we've got to really figure out how to say this in our statement, that we're going to eliminate these barriers that that don't create equitable access to education for all children.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. I am unable to see the whiteboard. I'm following along on my phone with the Google document. Ms. Villavicencio, could you please start noting that the issue of barriers and eliminating barriers is one that would be desired. And Dr. Robinson, thank you for your comments. I totally agree with you. We need to start naming things what they are. Diverse or diversity exists when you have two people in a room. That's all it is. We will be doing everyone a favor by helping model the fact that we need to be calling things what they are.
Vice Chair Brill.
Thank you. So I understand what Dr. Robinson's saying, and so my thought is that there's nothing to preclude us from creating two definitions, equity and racial equity. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to do that. I did a lot of Googling as I thought of my words, and I had sent Ms. Furtakis a couple of statements, actually 3, but I'm going to read 2 of them that I found that I just felt, for me, encapsulated what I was thinking. They both spoke to me, and the first one was that equity means each student, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender identity, disability, sexual orientation, religion, or socioeconomic status, will have access to the opportunities, resources, and support they need to attain their full potential. And I think that speaks to what Ms. Andrews was saying. I know that this was captured on the second page, I think, of what everybody got at the top. And then the other statement was, and this maybe needs to be tweaked more, but that racial equity means the absence of institutional and structural barriers experienced by people based on race or color that impede access, opportunities, and results. So, I feel, I don't know if we want to do this, but I would entertain 2 definitions. There's no reason why I do want to have an all-inclusive statement, but I also think that we do need to look at the racial piece because, yes, it's underlining. And Dr. Robinson, I will tell you that when I fought the battle for students with disabilities, we constantly said that what's good for our students with disabilities is good for all learners. So I understand what you're saying because, yes, everybody does better, when we improve it for one group. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a conversation that I had earlier this week that really made me think a lot about this equity journey that we're on. So I'm looking at the list of phrases and sentences, and at the bottom we have intentional allocation of resources. And one of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about is our leases at the schools. Some schools have tons of leases, as you guys know, and when a school has a lot of leases, what that means is that school gets a lot more money, that flexible dollars that they can do what they need to make the school better. But it seems, wildly unfair to me that some schools have the ability or a facility that they can lease out and other schools don't have that. So I had a great conversation with Ms. Paul about this. And so I had 2 suggestions and I added them to my things that we should do and not do, and I'll tie that back to what we should talk about today. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about when we were talking about having hard conversations, I think one of the hard conversations we have to have is the inequity built into our system by the way the system is structured. So this system is structured so that a wealthy community continues to gather more wealth and continues to build upon that. And so this leases is just one example, but if a school can have 61 leases, as I know someone like Loggers Run did in the past, they can have so much wealth at that school, and they can do more programs, they can hire more teachers, they can have more staff, they can get bagels for breakfast at back to school day. When you have a school that has 0 leases, as a lot of the schools in my district do, that's really difficult. So I was thinking about how do we intentionally distribute the resources so that all schools have access to it. Apparently certain districts have all those funds come back to the district and then they distribute them, or they purchase whatever they need. I know this is a controversial topic, but I think, as we think about it as a board, we have to think about these systems that were set up that continue to put more wealth back into communities that already have it. So I was thinking of maybe like a sliding scale for organizations that want to go into a school where a principal wants them there. And then I was also thinking about, a distribution of the leases at certain schools to go back to schools that don't have them. Apparently some schools do give to their feeder patterns when they have a lot of money come in. So I think those are things that we really need to talk about. So that's my first comment. The second comment on what Dr. Robinson said about a generalized statement versus a racial statement. I don't want to lose the LGBT community in this. It's just really important to me. And they may not have the attention of the country right now as much as they should, but they are extremely prejudiced against. And I think that's a problem within our system. And actually, I just received a call from someone the other day about the Asian representation in our school system and how we don't have a lot of leaders who are Asian. So that's been something that I've been thinking about too. So I think that this statement needs to talk about how we purposely distribute resources and about equity as a place where we're creating opportunities for belonging and inclusiveness and not looking at anyone based on race, because that's where I think the mistake is coming in. So I want to make sure that we're purposely prioritizing race in the work that we do, but I don't want it to be the equity statement based on race. It's just my personal opinion. Also, I highlighted diversity. I saw it was in here 3 times. I know some people might not like diversity, but I believe everyone brings qualities to the table, and those qualities make a school really important place for people to learn about each other. And so I think recognizing, appreciating, and kind of elevating the discussions around what people bring and the amazing parts of each of us is something that I really want to see in our statement, so that diversity is honored and we really create places of belonging. Last thing I'll say on that, my high school was a very, it was an international studies school in Broward. And when I got there, I always say I walked in as a white girl and I left as an Italian, because I wanted to be something so badly, because everybody there had something that they were proud of. And so I wanted to embrace being Italian. And I have to say, in 8th grade, I never cared about it. So I feel like we can make it so that people appreciate who they are and where they come from, and the contributions that they make to our schools that make it a better place than it is currently. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to a couple of things. The issue of leases, I have written that down on the 3rd page under the how. That is a specific example of either a barrier or an inequity that would be coming under this how, that you would be addressing it. And so I've added that to my list that I'll be sharing with Insight when we have our check-in. And so just want you to know that's being captured in the how. And I also wanted to note with your elevating the issue, you look on the 1st page of your document and this 3rd column, the 2nd to last bullet, it says use language that is positive, not deficit-based, energetic, and forward-thinking, which is getting to the issue you raised around looking at the assets and the strengths that our students bring, and that we're considering incorporating this type of affirming language, positive language in what your statement says. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
And thank you. And I think whichever way we go today, that we've got to include families and communities, and I really mean a real partnership, an authentic partnership with families and communities. In order for us to move our children, we've got to know their parents, their families, and really be out in the communities, because it is going to take all of us working together for success, for equitable outcomes for all children. And we can't just do it here at the district level. So it's got to be something where we're really empowering families and communities to work with us on our initiative with our statements. And I think whatever we do today, we've got to make sure that we honor the cultural histories of our children, our students within Palm Beach County. I mean, we know they have strengths and passions, and we have to honor where they came from so that we'll know who they are as we work on taking them to the next level.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So I'm going to circle back on the 2 points. So first, let me circle back on diversity. So what I was saying is I absolutely value diversity. Diversity comes in all different kind of categories, right? It could be geographic, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, whatever, right? But what I was saying is, let's not misuse the word and you substitute diverse for black, because that's what happened, in my opinion. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about diversity. So when I was growing up, back in the olden days, right, they used to talk about America was a melting pot. Well, that's a crock of horse manure, okay? So it never was, and actually, in my opinion, it never should be. And so because I'm from Michigan, I will refer to beef stew. If I was from South Florida, I might talk about paella, but I'm going to stick with beef stew. So this country is like beef stew. So you had the beef, the carrots, the potatoes, the onions, and so forth. Each thing has its own flavor, its own texture, and each thing by itself is good. And you put it together, it's outstanding, right? That's what we should be, right? And so my statement was not a statement that was anti-diversity. Diversity is a institutional word that, in my opinion, does not honor and value each of the components, right, in the beef stew, so to speak, right? And so my goal is to make sure that we are addressing each of the components, so to speak, in this district. Now, but let me go back to the racial equity piece. So whether we're talking about gender identity, whether we're talking about ESC, if you look at the intersectionality from what I have read, the data that I have looked at, even inside of those groups, black people are mistreated more than white people, right? So, you know, the major thing in LGBTQ, from what I read, right, I'm not the expert, is attacks on black trans women, okay? So let's not hide in our concern about LGBTQ, which, yes, they're absolutely mistreated. I'm not trying to up the isms, right? All the isms need to be addressed. What I'm saying to you is the root ism in this country is racism, right? And so whichever discriminatory pot you're looking in, when you disaggregate that, it's the black folks that are doing worse. Look at ESC. Okay, look at ESC. Let's look at the disproportionality of children who are questionably placed in ESC, and then somehow magically don't get the benefits that they should get in ESC, and that's disproportionate, right? So I want to be really clear. You guys can do 6-1 against what I'm saying. That's fine. But I want to be clear about what I'm saying so you can be opposed to what I'm saying clearly, okay? So this is not against anybody, right? Because we need to be addressing the needs of each group of students and each student in this district. But who are we failing to address their needs the most? The multi-generational black children, right? ESC children have laws that protect them and fund programs for them, rightfully so, right? So first generation has laws that protect them and funds, rightfully so. I don't know about LGBTQ. We should look at that if we have funding and laws that specifically call that group out for protection and services. But I can tell you that does not exist for multi-generational black children. Okay, what we call Title I, we're called poor. Now let's look at data based on socioeconomics. Compare white to black in every socioeconomic level. You will see that black folks in children in our district are faring worse. Okay? So let's just be crystal clear. You can disagree with me. You can vote my position down. But be clear about what I'm saying. Okay? Don't mix my stuff up in whatever other imaginary stuff. So if I'm not clear, please ask me a follow-up question, because if I'm just clear, this is who we are failing to serve. Okay? And when we put the processes in place, right, to give the power back, and so one of the things need to be shared power in this document. When we do this right, when we decide that we're going to acknowledge and address and develop and nurture the gifts and talents that each child brings, right? When we focus on black children who we don't want to focus on as an institution, then we will address the needs of everybody, because we will have changed our operating system. Right? When we change our operating system to address the, quote, least of us, we will address the needs of those who are more blessed and more fortunate or have different isms. I get the isms, right? But you're not going to get me to agree to we are the world. I'm not going to do it. Not when I've been fighting this fight for so long. And so you can roll your eyes if you want to. I don't care. Yes, I've been fighting this fight on this dais for 20 years. And in the community for many years prior to that. I know what I know, and I've been looking at data for a long time, and I've been studying this system for a long time, trying to figure out how to fix it. So I'm not going to sit here when we're saying we're going to talk about equity and actively participate in taking our eyes off of those that we are failing to serve to the greatest degree. It would be just like saying somebody who walks into the hospital and needs to be placed on a ventilator, do we go, oh, okay, let's treat them like everybody else? Not doing it. Not doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. To your point, one of the pieces that you were provided with as a board were some examples of equity statements that other districts have done. And the very first one that is on there addresses your point by centering and leading with race. It says, this school district is committed to supporting students, families, and staff by dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. We empower each individual for success by valuing race, environment, culture, ability, and identity. So they, this was, they did a lot of work on this with a lot of input. And again, the issue of leading with race and racism as the foundational piece that many of our issues are coming from, and recognizing that there are other systems of oppression and inequity that also need to be addressed. So that is a way that you could consider approaching this in what you come up with as a group.
Mrs. Whitfield and Mrs. McQuinn.
I think Mrs. Andrews was before me, actually. No? Okay, well, so I wanted to ask Dr. Robinson, as we're talking about this, more about what an equity statement that you think would recognize the deficits that we have within this system would look like. Do you want it to say at the beginning, racial equity statement? Do you want it to be like Ms. Furtakis said at the beginning, where it was like, you lead with race within the conversation? I'm sorry, I don't have that paper with me, but I'm curious to kind of delve in a little bit more, as you said, to ask questions about, what does it look like, so I can understand it better.
So what I was pushing back on was that equity statement that has everybody on it as the primary focus, right? Because what I know is that when we say everybody, black children get lost. That's how this operates, right? It always has. And so this statement, this Franklin Pierce statement looks like a good start. And I'm sorry, I did not do my homework, so I'm playing catch up here. But, you know, saying dismantling racism, I think is appropriate, and other systems of oppression and inequity. That's good. That recognizes everybody. But I just, like, if we are not going to call out racism, then whatever it is, I'm not going to vote for it. I'm going to just tell you, because that's the problem, right? So my old definition was bless them according to their needs. That's like the simple.
Yeah, I like that.
Overall, but that kind of is we are the world too, right? So I don't, like, if we're going to put it on a T-shirt, that's what I'm putting on the T-shirt. But
so
if we're going to really do a statement, it needs to call out racism.
So I did a lot of research reading into not just educational equity statements, but also ones for businesses and corporate America when I was looking at this. And one of the things that I noticed is some of them have a whole page or 2 pages of writing about what we can say that means something to us. So I'm curious for Ms. Furtakis if we could, I mean, is it okay for us to just have everything in there that we need to make it work? Because, I mean, I agree. You've been doing this work for a long time. I think this is exceptionally important. I don't want to miss out anything because we're trying to stick to one little 2 lines or 3 lines. And I liked the way a lot of corporate agencies put this on every job offer that they make. They put it on any kind of, they post it all over the buildings. They put it, they create this equity, like, as big as it needs to be. They put all of it out there on all these places where they're, advertising job opportunities. So people see it as like the backbone of the organization. So I want it to be as big as it needs to be to include all of the parts that make it as strong as it needs to be. So anyway, that's what I was just wanted to bring up is could we put that at the top, but also make sure to include, I mean, I don't want to make it we are the world just for the we are the world, but I do think it needs to cover all of the pieces that we feel like are important as a district.
Yes, in response to your question, because this is why the ones that you were researching and all of you who were doing some research, they all look a little different because they're responding to the local context. They're responding to what the people who were involved in creating them felt needed to be focused on and addressed. So it can be as short or as long as you want it to be. Our task for today would be creating the framework for that, which is what can be done generally in 1, 2, or 3 sentences. It absolutely can be worked on and built out as you go forward to incorporate what it is you would like to say. What is in here is also going to be part of what happens with your equity policy that you have. And you may decide that you want to have both an equity policy and a racial equity policy. That is up to the board to determine as a group what is going to best address, call out, and meet the needs for your specific situation in your district.
Mrs. McQuinn, then Mrs. Andrews, then Ms. Brill.
I believe it was at our last workshop that, and I remember being a little uncomfortable. Okay, we got feedback going on here somewhere. That I was uncomfortable because I did not specifically say our Hispanic students. But I pointed out that I believed when we agreed to do these workshops that we were starting with equity for our Black students. Not that they're the only students we have to address by any means, but we said, I thought, we were talking about our Black students. Because as Dr. Robinson said, across every single group, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's ESC, ELL, our Black students underperform the way we measure them. So I've been reading and rereading our own equity policy and all of the statements in it. Honestly, it's pretty good. But we can include a statement, it includes all of those groups. I don't think we've left any group out. But we can have a statement that says You know, tend to use non-educationalese terms, but we can say we are failing our black students. I don't care, but because how we say it, but we are, and we need to address it. So I just wanted to clarify where I thought we were.
Mrs. Andrews, then Vice Chairwoman Brill.
And thank you. One of the things that I know I marked in my work to Mrs. Fotakis was eliminate racist conditions, systematic racism and oppression. And the other one was examine root causes of student performance disparities. When you're talking about LGBTQ plus students and ELL, there's a reason for these children not being able to succeed. But I think when we do our statement, we've got to say those words that we don't like to say. And I think this is what Dr. Robinson is talking about. It's easy to say some of those other words which make you feel a lot comfortable, and you can put it in your employment guide to say this is what we do. You've got to really mean what you say you're going to do. And so you've got to kind of, when you put your piece of paper out there with your statement, it needs to be hard and clear to let people know you really recognize that you do have racist situations within your school district and that you are going to be working to eliminate those things. And racism is alive and well. And so we've got to say it. We've got to keep saying it because it's happening to a lot of children. And those disparities that are happening to ESC and ELL and all these other children, it's going on every day, even though we have it written on paper. When you look at your policy, the School District of Palm Beach County policy, it talks about all these nice little cute words about what we're doing. But guess what? We haven't done it for everybody. And we've left people out. So you got to put some heavy-duty words in so that when people see this next time around, they know you didn't kind of cow to undercut it a little bit to say, well, we're going to do this and we're for everyone. You've got to kind of be heavy-duty. And I looked at a lot of school districts that are really progressive, that have departments of equity where people have gone out to do the work that has to be done, that we're trying to do here in Palm Beach County. And they led with race and oppression and talked about why students aren't making the grade and what they need to do to get their students there. All students, especially those students that's been left behind. And we know who they are.
Vice Chairwoman Brill.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to, excuse me, where I started with two different definitions, one for equity and one for racial equity, because I really do believe that our equity statement needs to be all-inclusive, but where the rubber hits the road is where our policies and procedures are. And I want to read the third. There were three different things from this particular school district that I pulled off, and it was the achieving racial equity, which I think should be part of a racial equity statement. What they had, it says, achieving racial equity requires proactive and continuous investment in communities of color who have endured centuries of systemic oppression. And then we are committed to dismantling structures rooted in white privilege, to hearing and elevating underrepresented voices, and recognizing and eliminating bias. So I don't disagree with Dr. Robinson. The numbers speak for themselves. We do know that our black community is overrepresented in ESC. We knew that years ago. There were studies on that in every group. We know that. But I do think that we need to have an all-inclusive statement, but then we need to drill into the racial equity pieces. I'm not saying to ignore them. That's why I said maybe we need two definitions, but when the rubber hits the road and what we do have to understand and have those hard conversations, which we're having now, about the things we need to dismantle in this district so that all children move forward.
Your microphone's not on, Ms. Fotakis.
Thank you. If you're looking for that statement that Ms. Brill just referred to, it is on the top of page 3. I put it under the how because it leads with the word achieving racial equity, and it's explaining that this is how this was going to happen. It is a very good statement that would be very appropriate if you wanted to say something like that. I also wanted to go back to Ms. Andrews' statement where she highlighted the phrase that is, if you look at page 1 and column 2, the 9th bullet from the bottom, eliminate racist conditions, systemic racism, and oppression. And I want to put it out there for the group. That would be a very bold, accurate statement. And is this something that you want captured in the notes, that you would like something that or something very similar to it as a part of your the statement that you're developing today?
Mrs. Whitfield, then Dr. Robbins.
Yes, I love that. I think that's really great. So I was looking at these statements that we had, and I just wanted to put a word out there for a potential possibility. Was the first half of Franklin Pierce and the second half of Marysville. School is committed to supporting students, families, and staff by dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. And then we will embrace, celebrate, and honor the diversity of our students, staff, parents, and community members in helping each student achieve personal academic success. I love both of those. I think it leads with the racism piece, but also ties in the part where we're embracing and celebrating, which is what I really want it to have, kind of a positive spin on it, and recognizing the importance of each person and what they bring to the table. That's important for making a great school. Thanks.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So, yeah, I like the first part of the Franklin Pierce as well. Okay, so we're talking about words. So I want something that talks about shared power. And I think that needs to be called out explicitly. Then the other, I need to say this about this phrase, communities of color. You know that just normalizes white some more. And I'm not interested in that. I'm just not. And so, I mean, I think that if we're going to talk about, what I will lovingly refer to as black and brown people, then let's call out the groups, right? The African American, African diaspora, Latino, Latina, Latinx. I don't know where I'm supposed to land with those terms anymore. So, and then whatever other groups, right? But communities of color, I'm gonna push back on every time because it normalizes white too much for me. But now, this statement, this equity statement, it still seems to me, I'm not going to support two different definitions. I'm not going to support a definition for equity and another one for racial equity. I'm not. That's just the other thing again. That's just here, like, here's, you colored people over there have this, right? But I will support a definition similar to the start of Franklin Pierce, or even the committed to our equity journey to learn about, interrupt, and address the patterns of current and historic systemic racism and oppression. Like, I like that phrase. Then we could talk about, like, we can name all the groups, every group you want to name. I don't care. But if we're not leading very clearly and intentionally with addressing racism, that I'm not particularly interested in this conversation. And the other thing, though, is I think that we need to make a strong statement about where we're trying to go. So, like, supporting and helping, those are like nice words. I think we need to have a stronger verb, and that it ends with however we're going to describe it in here, what I call the portrait of a graduate. Like, we're going to do these things and with the intention that every child would reach that mark, right? Not helping them, not supporting them, because we already help and support some and not others. So I want the statement to be clear, to Ms. Andrews' point, that the goal is to provide this for everyone. Our intention is that everyone will reach this mark. Will we get to 100%? I know we won't, but our statement, it should not be a check, we did it. It should be an aspirational statement. I believe, y'all can correct me, right? But so those are my points. It has to talk about dismantling racism. And I like, and other systems of oppression and inequity, because that's real, right? and then also the shared power, and then at the end, it has to talk about what we're trying to achieve for everybody. That's equity, the noun that I keep talking about.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And I read a lot of those, the mission statements for a lot of the big districts. I didn't see two of them. Most of them, it was just one. And I think we just have to kind of delve in it today and get those key words and make it full enough for people to understand. And one of the things I'd like to see somewhere in this statement would be to redistribute access and opportunity. I think that's really important because, I mean, we're a $3 billion agency right here. And Mr. Barbieri, I was just out in Pahokee yesterday. You were out there a year ago. We're still looking at talking about equity. Come on, okay? We're still fighting for these children in different areas and different locations, ESC. We know where they are. So it's got to be something for the public and the people, the children and their families to know that we're going to change how we actually provide access and opportunity, especially for everyone, but especially for these children who are still suffering. And we have all these wonderful words in our policy that we're doing it, but we've got to put some heavy-duty words in this mission statement for people to say, okay, they're in a different place now, and they mean what they say. Because if not, and it's kind of, you know, sort of gentle, you can go back and look at the policy. And the policy it's really nice, but it doesn't work. Policy 1.041 about equity, and we know it's not true because so many children are being left behind, families are being left behind. So I'm looking it's something to say something about, you know, equitable opportunities, access, you know, with how we're going to make sure these children be able to have a better opportunity for success. And we can pull all their names out, the group side if you want to, but we got to really zero in and make the hard words. I know you may not want to hear those words, but we got to put them in there.
Before we go too far, I want to make sure that we're capturing some of the thoughts that have been expressed. And I'd like to back up a little bit. Dr. Robinson, to respond back to your last comments, if you look at the top of page 3, which was the phrase that Ms. Brill was referring to, and you were talking about, you didn't want to see communities of color in there, but to actually call out groups within a framework where these words are sounding pretty good as a place to be, something to be looking at. But I also wanted to look at the issue of sharing power. And as this statement goes forward, it's saying the school district is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white privilege, to hearing and elevating underrepresented voices. We could insert by sharing power, to hearing, sharing power, recognizing and eliminating bias. You could also put in there, to Ms. Andrews' comment, redistributing resources to provide access and opportunity to historically marginalized groups. So I just wanted to see if that would be, if you were interested and if the group is interested in maybe looking at that as you're following up your how, if that would be a place to be inserting the issue of sharing power.
Mrs. McQuinn?
Going back to Dr. Robinson yet again, one of the words that's in some of the stuff that we read was rather than supporting, etc., is the word enabling. So, of course, I had to look up now the definition for enable. And somewhere in there it says to make able, to give power, to give the means. So somewhere in there I think we can use a stronger word that is perhaps enable. Now, that was the first thing I wanted. But the other in here, one of the Families First board that I'm on, representing this board, we have been also doing racial equity training. And Barbara Cheeves did a several-hour workshop with us. We can agree. I personally like this. So coming from a white person's vantage point, when I hear white privilege, I certainly didn't grow up privileged, but I did grow up white advantaged. And I like that term, white advantage, because I have an advantage by virtue of the fact that I can walk into a store and I am white. So I just want to throw that out there.
Ms. McQuinn, was that a term created by that facilitator? I've never really heard that term been used like that.
I don't know. I have no idea. She's done a lot of study and workshops on this racial equity, and it's the first time I've ever heard it, but I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
Dr. Robinson?
Yeah, white advantage is the term that is now being used in the racial equity conversations, because the privilege was, it was really not on point, right? And I agree wholeheartedly. I think that white advantage expresses the comparison better, you know. So, but I want to just say, so I like the word enable. That's still not the word for me, right? I'm not sure. It's almost like I want to say, our goal is to, develop students who reach this mark. Like, that's what we're trying to do, right? Not like we're supporting them, we're making it possible for them, right? Like, so we say things now about, opportunities, right? But if one point of view is these opportunities for all students have always existed. You might just have to be able to leap over mountains and climb tall buildings, but they've been there, right? And so the removal of barriers, I think, is appropriate. But I just want to say something about, I still want us to figure out what our graduates should look like. But whatever that is, I'm going to call it X for now, that we say that we are doing all this to make sure that all students reach X, right? Now, and again, are we aspirational? Or are we trying to measure and say we did it? Because I'm aspirational. So I don't know what somebody needs to tell me in this conversation. Is it aspirational? Or are we going to say, well, we can't do everybody, but we're going to try? Because I'm not interested in that part.
Can I ask the group, does the word intentional or intentional, I wonder, sort of from Quinn's point, so I don't know, the mission and vision, obviously the board are working on, but when I talk to the team now about this type of work, the question I would ask them is, are we going to be intentional in getting this across the finish line? So what actions intersect with the intentionality of our efforts? Mm-hmm. So we can have all the aspirations in the world, but what intentional steps are we going to take to make sure that these children can take advantage of the opportunities that exist for them, right? And I just throw that out there as part of the conversation.
Mrs. McQuinn?
Now, I've had many conversations with friends, colleagues, et cetera, over the past few months, and I'm the one who included the phrase from the Austin School District Superintendent, all means all. For me, all means all. So for me, it's by the end of third grade. I'm going to keep going back to third grade. A black student may come to us in kindergarten behind, for whatever the reason. By the end of third grade, all means all. Every single student, barring some physical disability, whatever, but if I've got a black student and a white student, everything except the color of their skin being different, we ought to be there. And people tell me, well, Barbara, you can't expect 100%. I don't understand why I can't expect 100%. So I haven't been argued out of that yet. I don't want to see a percentage growth. I want to see a standard.
Vice Chair Brill?
Thank you. So, sorry about that. So I like what's up there highlighted, but I feel just as strongly as strongly as Dr. Robinson feels about not having all the groups in it, I feel that our statement does have to start with everybody in it. So I'm thinking of a longer statement where we start off by defining equity with all the different groups and leading into the statement about achieving racial equity. So we put in the piece and the focus on racial, but I just feel that it would be unfair for us not to recognize, nationality, gender identity. I just cannot, I could not support a statement that is focused solely on that. I'd like it to be a lot broader, but then for zeroing in, because I do think that we're being very disingenuous to all the other students if we don't, and the LGBTQ plus community especially, because that's another group that's, it's going to start, we're hear more and more about how disenfranchised they feel and how they're not getting what they need. So I just think we have to have a more inclusive statement, what we can drill into the racial equity within it.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so I don't know, maybe I'm not as clear as I think I am, because I think I tried to say that we would lead with race, I guess is the phraseology to use, and include everybody. So I never said exclude everyone. So let's be clear, right? So just don't do that. Okay, now the other thing is, let me just add, for clarity's sake, that when I'm looking on page 3 here, and it has subgroups, ESE, ELL, African American, Hispanic / Latino, LGBTQ, I plus. Somebody tell me what A and I is, please.
Asexual, intersectional,
okay.
Pansexual is the plus.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then it has 2 in parentheses. What does that mean?
There's I was actually looking at all of these acronyms over the weekend to try to figure out what the best one to suggest for this was. There are acronyms that go on, where they've doubled up on the letters. There's multiple different things. So, the plus is and the 2, so some of them have 2 things that
the two was simply my noting that 2 people had responded saying that was an issue for them.
Okay.
Sometimes there's multiple eyes, is what I was going to say. There's different.
Thank you for that. So, good. I'm trying to learn. So, but let me just say, those subgroups exclude the African diaspora, right? So we have a lot of students who may identify as Jamaican, Haitian, Bahamian, whatever, but so this terminology excludes. So I think the system must think that black equals African American equals African diaspora, but it really doesn't. When I say black, I'm talking about the African diaspora, but everybody is not, right? And so for the sake of clarity, I agree it should say African American, which I will call multi-generational Africans in America, but we also need to specifically call out members of the African diaspora as a subgroup. At least one subgroup.
Thank you for raising that. These are what you see before you was the exact wording that was submitted when people were turning things in, and this is why we're having the conversation, because I don't think it was intended to be an all-inclusive list, but it was things that were coming to mind. So this is another reason why it's helpful to not just for us to be having this conversation, but to be going out when you take this out to some key stakeholders to see if there has been a group that has not been included unintentionally. I would support your wanting to highlight for your purposes, knowing what the groups are in your community who have been historically marginalized, to name them so they know that they've been seen.
Mrs. Andrews?
And just to add into that, Dr. Robinson, we just did the conference on the All Together Now for LGBTQ+, and part of the history that we talked about is the blacks. You might think that most LGBTQ+ people are white, but that's not true. It's a large number, a majority right now. When you think about your children, your adults, many of them are black Americans. So, they're included in this whole piece that we're talking about when we say they're left behind and they're not getting what they need to get, and so they're in that bucket that you're talking about that we're fighting for right now with the LGBTQ+.
Ms. Villavicencio, would you please, in looking at what's been said, let's see if we can pull out some things to be looking at a statement, not to say this is finalizing anything, but just for being able to isolate a few things. What I'm hearing, if we could, under where you've got example statement, what I've been hearing is some consensus around the first part of the Franklin Pierce definition, which, if we were phrasing it the way they've done, it would start off by saying Palm Beach County Schools is committed to supporting students, families, and staff by dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity as its potential first start. And then the piece underneath that, which is the how statement, which we're looking at and wanting to make that strong and leading with race, would be the achieving racial equity requires proactive and continuous investment in, and we're going to underline communities of color. That's been highlighted as something that should be changed, who have endured centuries of systemic oppression. Palm Beach County Schools is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white advantage, to hearing and elevating underrepresented voices by sharing power, recognizing and eliminating bias, and redistributing resources to provide access and opportunity to historically marginalized groups. So if we could pull that out for further discussion so that we can have it revolving around what this might look like as a potential statement, that I think would be helpful.
Ms. Furtakis, I think one thing that we discussed that's not there is eliminating barriers or removing obstacles.
Okay, so let's, underneath when that's pulled out, let's put a little star or asterisk and eliminating barriers. And I'm sorry, you said the second part, Mr. Barbieri?
Removing obstacles and eliminating barriers is what.
All right.
Dr. Robinson, then Mrs. Whitfield. Mrs. Whitfield.
I just had a question about how we would identify all the groups so that they feel recognized. Is that something that you have an idea, Ms. Furtakis, on how to do? I'm like very kind of thrown by that. It seems like even if we list everybody that we can possibly think of, we might miss somebody. Yeah, I don't want to miss anybody.
Yes, thank you for asking that. So that has been done in different ways and in places. What has been done, one example would be making a statement, and I'm just going to throw this out, might be something like our historically marginalized groups, and then there's maybe the number one, and then below the statement there is a long list of what that means based on what the district's data is telling them. And your district's data is very clear what the groups and who the groups are that have been historically marginalized and the disparity in outcomes that you're seeing. Or they can put that list as well as they can at the time that they're making their draft in the text of the statement. And then that's part of the input because the next part of this is going out to key stakeholders to ensure that what you're thinking about is being inclusive, and then groups will tell you if they don't feel that they're being recognized within that, and that's part of that process.
Dr. Robinson.
Does that help?
Does that help, Ms. Whitfield?
I'm still not sure it would work. I just was picturing like the Palm Beach Post headline that says Bangladeshi community is angry that they haven't been included in, PowerPoint or an equity statement where every other group in Palm Beach County was listed. That's just an example that I was just thinking of with Dr. Fenoy. But like, I just am afraid we miss someone, and it doesn't. It's not all inclusive of our representation in our district. I think we have 157 different countries represented here, or something ridiculously.
I was just going to ask Mary, in your context, see Washington has probably hundreds of different ethnicities in their public schools. Like, I'm just curious, how do you how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, well, we just had an example of this. I think I sent to a couple of you with in the last 3 weeks. One of my other hats is I serve on the Washington State Board of Education, and we just did a very system-changing, courageous thing. Actually, the day after our last workshop, we voted in a 3-page resolution that our equity committee that I'm a part of created with a lot of community input on the issue of ethnic studies. And we have signaled our intention to pursue a graduation requirement statewide of ethnic studies for our students. And because of the nature of that, which has as its focus, it's a pedagogy, it's not just a class that has to be embedded across all K-12 learning standards, we were grappling with this issue also. So what we came up with was we did have the number 1 in there, and then we listed groups that were identified through our own state data as how they are calculating or including people and recognizing who they are, and that those which are different than federal, and they're incorporating the input of our ethnic caucuses who inform that type of work.
Dr. Robinson, then Ms. McQuinn, then Mrs. Andrews.
No, go ahead, because I'm a.
All right, Mrs. McQuinn.
I was going. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask Dr. Robinson a question. So before she goes, call on me when it's her turn, so I can ask her the question.
You're up.
Oh, good. Okay. So where it says centuries of systemic oppression. Okay. I've heard Dr. Robinson several times say multi-generational. Centuries is just like centuries. It's a boring word. So maybe multi-generational or whatever.
So when you hear me talk about multi-generational, I'm talking about people, not the oppression. So, because I want people to understand is that, I'm going to just say African, this is what Karl Muhammad talks about, the African descendants of slaves. So the multi-generational has a different experience in 2021 in this country than first generation, right? So and it's, to some extent, I'm going to say this, and I might be criticized for it, but somebody told me, described it as a grasshopper effect, okay? So over the generations, if it's like a grasshopper in a jar with a lid on, and you're jumping, trying to get out, you can't get out. You eventually stop jumping. The lid can be taken off. You're not getting out, right? And so, and that's what some people are talking about when they talk about the need for us to learn our history, because is too often, because of the generations of oppression, and I'm going to say loss of hope, that we would not sometimes reach for the opportunity, okay? As opposed to first generation. Of course, I'm painting with broad brushes here. But just like if you read The Warmth of Other Suns, she talks about very clearly the attributes of people who migrate, whether you migrate across a state, across a country, or to another land, right? They tend to be the most inspired, or there we go, self-motivated of their tribe, if you will, right? And so you have people who are coming from other countries here, And I'm talking about the African diaspora, but the same applies. I think about every time I'm looking at people who are at the border who have come hundreds of thousands of miles walking, trying to get here. Like, damn, they bring us some fire and some spirit, right? That I think that I would embrace, but whatever. So, but the point is that all African people are not the same, right? Because we have different experiences, and so some come and they're still jumping because they also are the most self-motivated of their tribe. And then we're here, and we've been told every day of our lives that we don't belong here. We're less than. We're not intelligent. We're all the negatives. We got that message every damn day, right? Unfortunately, we get it in school too, in addition to the media and all that. So when I'm talking about multi-generational, that's what I'm highlighting, right? The systems of oppression are centuries, right? But it's the multi-generational people who have experienced it, and that if you believe in epigenetics, where trauma gets transferred into your alleles and your genetic makeup, and it gets transferred on, then you can easily see how that, I'm gonna call it unwillingness to jump, maybe, gets passed on, right? And if it's not genetic, it's taught because the wait. Let me get this.
It's a word I want to say. It's classical conditioning.
Say it.
Classical conditioning. It's a basic psychological term.
Yeah.
When you've been conditioned. So like if you study psychology, you ring the bell, you feed the dog. After a while, the dog hears the bell, they salivate.
Yeah.
So what I would argue that if you've been conditioned as a culture, you're not supposed. You should, like, I'm 6'4", 300 pounds. My entire life, I've been told you need to make yourself small so people aren't scared of you. So it's like the conversation we had the other day around when I was stopped by the police. Ms. McQuinn said to me, "Well, why didn't you get their badge number? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" I was like, "Well, my baby was in the car. I got out of that situation with the police because I'm the superintendent. They let me go without anything. But I have to make sure he understands that if you're driving my car without me, you don't have the privilege that I have. So I need you to just be as compliant and non-aggressive as you can, because you're 12 and you're 170 pounds. So you're going to be just like, so you're conditioned to survive."
Right, and it's some of it's survival. Because, okay, so I'm just say this, I'm going to go back to my point. I used to try to visualize, how can I tattoo it on my son's forehead? His mama's a doctor, his daddy's a doctor, he's really a good boy. Please don't shoot him, okay? So that's my reality. I've been scared for 38 years, right? So, but that's kind of a different thing. But this is what I want to go back to. So I was told by somebody who used to be in this school district, a multi-generational African person who was an administrator in this district. I'm trying to use non-identifying information. So I used to visit, I would visit schools on the first day of school and try to visit new principals, right? And so this one year I was with this person, and we had left the school. Whatever the conversation was, I said it my way, and she said it in another way. And I looked at her and said, "Dang, I have to learn how to speak like that," because it was all nice and warm and fuzzy. But it was the same thing. If you listen really closely, it was the same thing. And she said to me, "Dr. Robinson, you need to understand where I came from. If you spoke the way you spoke, you could be dead. In my lifetime," she said. Okay? So now, think of that. Now, that's your experience. And then what are you teaching your children, right? And so, and then part of that manifests, I think, in not being aggressive about pursuing your dream, right? And then what happens is that when you start, then, you're bad, right? So you asked, because I get these calls all the time, the child's very inquisitive, very bright, and is challenging the teacher on how you do that math problem, and so the child is bad, right? So my point is saying that I just want to make the point, I use multi-generational to say our experience is different. It's not as, first generation, multi-generational is not as different as black and white, but it is different, right? And so, and my concern is if we don't get this straight now, those first generational Africans in America, in another generation or two, their children are going to be experiencing the same thing my children are. And that's what we need to stop the bleed, so to speak. So,
Did that answer your question, Ms. McQuinn?
Well, yes, she likes centuries, and I can live with that too. But I'm so happy to have gotten that understanding, because it does explain, on a very elementary level, why we have many people who say, please, they've been here for 3 generations. Why don't, they've got all kinds of opportunities. I love the grasshopper in the jar, so thank you. I really never even thought of that.
Okay, great. This is why it's important to have these conversations, and I would absolutely concur. This is certainly the experience that we've had in my district, where we have more African diaspora students than we have students who are multi-generational African American, and it is a different experience that they're having. It is also the same for our Latinx students who may have just arrived, as opposed to those who have been here for 2 or 3 generations. And so it is a different experience, and it is important for us to be aware of that as we're trying to be meeting the needs that are being carried by our very different groups of students.
But Ms. Fatakis, I just need to say one more thing, because I don't want anybody to interpret that it's the grasshopper's fault. Okay? I just want to be real clear about that, right? So the lid was put on. In many respects, the lid is still there, right? But so I just didn't want anybody to interpret what I was saying to say, well, they just need to jump, they need to get over, or anything like that. So I just wanted to say that. And let me just say one more thing, because I need to give an example that's in my mind of how this plays out. So, we had this thing going on in West Palm Beach pre-pandemic where, my pastor and others would do this peace walk, and they would walk through communities and share information about opportunities, right? And so one of those opportunities was like the pre-apprenticeship program at North Tech, right? And so first it was like people not understanding, well, why aren't they taking advantage of this great opportunity? And then when people would say, okay, I'll try it, and then they'll go there, and then they're not well received, because they're walking in there who they are with their experiences, but the people are expecting somebody to walk in with a white middle class demeanor, right? And so if we're going to do, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because hopefully we will do some real substantive work in this area. And I'm talking about adults right now, but it applies to children. Understand that we're going to need to do a lot more encouragement and have people who are culturally responsive, culturally astute to help bridge that space, because they're walking into a foreign land in their opinion, right? They have not had this experience. The rules of governing yourself are completely different in that space than they are in the most familiar territory. My son, who's a civil engineer, when he worked for the county, the first 6 months, he'd die if he knew I was saying this. The first 6 months, that boy called me, he's a grown man. My son called me a couple times every day with something that somebody said or did that he could not understand, because and I kept saying, boy, you're in a white workplace now, right? They run things differently. Let me tell you how to play this game, right? And so I just need people to understand this. It's a whole different world. And so we can't just say they're not jumping, or they jump one time and then they quit. It's how are they received? If we really mean what we say, right? We need to understand that people have different experiences, and and that's why I'm very intentional about saying we have a white, female, middle class culture, because I need people to embrace that, to understand that if you're not used to playing in white, middle class, female culture world, it's a completely different world, It's a completely different world, right? And so people will disengage, and we're meaning well, right? But because we haven't changed the culture of the place receiving adults or students, then, you know, we're not serving them well. Because we expect them to fit into their round pegs. We want them to fit into our square hole.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, at the very beginning there, and I like what Franklin Pierce said, but I'd like to add a little bit more where it says Palm Beach County School is committed to supporting students, families, and staff. But I want to put communities in there, because if we're going to make this happen, we can't just do it within this bubble of the school district with the families. We're going to need the communities, which consist of our business partners and agencies and everybody else that we need to help us. So somewhere we need to make sure that we're all in this together, and we've got to consider our communities, our partners out there that hopefully will help us to dismantle this racism. That's something I'd like to put in.
Ms. Ayala?
Thank you. To Dr. Robinson's point about spaces being welcoming, I know that that's a conversation I've had with Dr. LaCava and his whole team about how are our school teams reflecting students so that not only the instructors feel welcome, and we've talked about the difficulties of culturally arriving to work here and being used to a workplace that is not the same rules of engagement that we have here, whether they're from another country or from another part of the country that is very different in terms of rural versus urban. And so I think it's really important. And I was, during this work and homework we had, I was looking through our current equity policy and looking at the desired outcomes. And I think we all agree that it's time to bridge the gap between what our aspirations are and our reality. There are many things on this list that I know we're not meeting to the way we want to meet them. And there are many things in our strategic plan that we did not hit the mark on. So being real and serious about implementing the work that needs to be done to make these changes, desired and reality are not lining up. So I think we all agree that we need to get on the right page on that. And I have to say this because I would be remiss if I don't, that our fastest growing student population around the country, as well as over a third of our own right here, is Hispanic Latinx. And that includes Afro-Latinos, and it includes folks from the African diaspora who are also Latinx. So when we talk about all of the things we all want, intersectionality is the buzz. We know that the racism is at the root of what everything is, the rot of everything that is causing problems in our district, but we cannot start parsing people out, leaving anyone out, and making anyone feel like their experiences are not valid or like they don't matter because they don't fall into a couple of categories. And I have to say that because I know very well that I benefit because I'm white passing Latin. So I'm saying that from my worldview and my perspective, but for my not white passing Latin students, they need to know that they are just as able to achieve and just as supported and just as capable, and that the barriers put in place are not their fault. So that is something that I want to be very clear on. So I needed to say that. Another piece of all of the work that we've been talking about is that adults need to start taking ownership for student outcomes more than blaming students. There's a lot of, well, they just couldn't get it. Well, we did everything we could. Well, at the end of the day, our job is to do everything we can and then some, not to say we did everything we could and they just couldn't get a hang on it. So I really want to figure out how we put the onus on us as a district to make sure that everyone we employ and everyone who has direct student contact at all levels is doing their very best at all times to make sure that the outcomes and what we talk about, the completion gaps, the achievement gaps, what are we doing to eradicate those situations from being tied to their racial identity? I feel like there's a question there that we should all reflect on. I couldn't agree more with Ms. Andrews' statements on diverse cultures. I think that we need to make sure that we're embracing them, that we're placing value on everyone's differences, and culture, outside of what it means for us as a district, the cultural uniqueness of what it means for every student who we serve, it's really important to them. It's really important to who they are. It's their story. It's important to their families. It is their worldview. So in the vein of how are we, I'm looking at Mary, in the world of how we are embracing everyone's cultural unique identity, how are we making sure that that is represented in our statement so everyone knows just because you practice this religion or you like this holiday and don't celebrate this one, you're not going to be left out of being supported here. And the last thing I wanted to say was that my favorite statement of the examples was actually the Guilford County one that was in our folder, and it was the first one. It was a big packet, and it talked about uncovering and dismantling any differences or unique identifiers that as predictors of achievement. Because there's a lot of, well, if we can put people into categories and we know that they're middle class or white, we can expect them to do good. But how can we start eradicating the idea that different identifying factors are what makes you achieve, and start implementing the idea that we are responsible for making sure that we are providing an education that overcomes that. And that was a good thing I got from this, the Guilford County Schools statement, which I really liked. But that's what I had to say. Thank you.
If I can respond, a couple of things. Ms. Villavicencio, is it possible for you to pull that statement that Ms. Ayala was just referring to, so we can highlight that for the group?
Yes, I'll look for it now.
Okay, thank you. The other piece, I appreciate the way you're phrasing things and looking at this with affirmative language and how we make sure that we're not ignoring any group of students. This also is really getting to the heart of what equity is each of you have been identifying groups and individuals with needs because of their unique lived experiences in this country and in the cultures that they come from. So one of the things that's coming out up for me as I'm hearing this is that some of these things you're talking about are coming under what I separated out on page 3, which is the how. How do we get there? And some of it is actually, this is where the resource allocation decisions that you'll be making later are going to impact how you are able to address this, because clearly training is needed, professional development for your staff. There's things that are going to need to change related to instruction. And your curriculum? Are your students able to see themselves in either, in any kind of depiction, in the scenarios that might be used, examples that might be used, photographs of things? Do they see themselves? So many of these things you're talking about for the change are coming under the how. And again, you're providing the overarching framework for this. And when you are including words like dismantling the structures rooted in white advantage, sharing power, eliminating bias, dismantling racism and other systems of oppression, you're making very bold statements that recognize these are your reality. And the how you're going to get there, you are doing the umbrella piece of that by talking about that redistribution of resources that I just talked about. There clearly is going to have to be some changes in how things are done. And because part of that's got to go towards professional development, as an example. So you are, and once we get beyond this piece, if you want to flush this out even more, to make it even more specific about what you're talking about, the board absolutely can do that. I feel, my feeling as I'm looking at what you're doing right now is that you are calling out the reality, and it is aspirational, and you're saying what needs to be done on a systems level to make these changes that you're recognizing have to happen in order for each child to experience success and well-being in your system.
So, Mary, the Guilford County definition is up. I don't know if one of the board members maybe wants to read it out loud.
Sayala, you want to read that?
Sure, I'll read it. We are committed to creating equitable and inclusive schools where adults take ownership for student learning outcomes and make sure students have what they need to succeed in school and in life. We will acknowledge and dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability, and English language status as predictors of achievement. We will align resources to create equitable opportunities for students and employees. We will eradicate achievement gaps.
Thank you. What I would ask then is, in looking at that, and thank you for sending me the screenshot of it because it's not showing up. Thank you. What are some things that, looking at what we've pulled out to this point, that you either see reflected in it, or that you think there is a concept or 2 or 3 that should be either included or substituted for what you've been working on at this point?
Mrs. Andrews?
I love the part where it says, we will acknowledge and dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability. That's what we have to do to get to where we need to go. So right up in there, we've got to dismantle that. That's a big piece for me.
Dr. Robinson?
So I don't really know what the question was, but I will say on this definition of equity, I'm going to push back on the word opportunities. For me, I would like to say outcomes. So, because I'm trying to push us to something at the end. And so let me just say this. So this is probably inappropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I missed part of the statement. So, Ms. Ayala, I think you said something about, I don't know if you said Latino, Hispanic, tell me which word you want me to use.
I typically use Hispanic, Latinx to make sure I'm covering everybody.
Okay, so I think you might have said Hispanic, Latinx are the largest population of students being left behind. Did you say something a lot? Tell me what you said so I'm clear.
I have it written down, so I'll tell you what I said. I said that Hispanic, Latinx students are the fastest growing student population in the country, and that right here in our district, over a third of them are Hispanic, Latinx that we serve. Does that sound like what I said? Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So then I misheard it, so I apologize.
Ms. Whitfield?
Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents on this piece. I love the English language status. I think that's huge. It's such a predictor of how people get treated in the country, is whether or not they have the right words to say at the right moment. And so I think that is a huge piece of equity, is even if they don't sound like you, that they get the same opportunities as you. So I would love to see that in there. So I think there's pieces of that could go into that piece with the Franklin Pierce, and then I'm still a big fan of the Marysville or whatever I said it was, that bottom piece, because I think it's so positive. But we could stick in the mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability, and English language status, and then throw in some LGBTQ in there, like gender identity / sexual orientation. And I would love that. I think that would be a good addition to all of it.
Also, when we talked, I mentioned eliminate barriers and obstacles. Dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets are the same thing, I think. It's the dismantling is eliminating the barriers and the obstacles to getting children, all of them, the equitable outcome that they deserve. So I think we should, incorporate that somehow in that statement. Mrs. Andrews?
Yeah, and we have to really make sure that we put a piece that it is going to be the responsibility of the adults to own what's happening in the classroom. We have so many children that are failing, and people out there these days, and it goes right back to the classroom teacher, because that's where it happens, within the classroom. They don't understand that they're truly responsible for the success of students. That's what you're talking about, Ms. McQuinn, when we say all, okay? And as a result, we don't emphasize that enough. I think sometimes they're in there and they're doing their own thing based on their own opportunities, who they are as a great teacher. And so if you fail 30% and you didn't make it, that's the way it is. I'm not going to go back and reteach to try to make sure you know that. We have to emphasize that a whole lot, that we do expect the adults to do a better job in making sure that we can, our students can succeed. And I just know that when we see schools and teachers with all the F's and D's and they don't take ownership for not teaching, because if you're teaching and you're teaching effectively, students should be able to be successful. And you may have to reteach and do other things and be creative. But adults have to know that. But I think here and across the country, you know, people feel like, you know, I did my day's work, I taught it, you didn't get it, so that's it. And it's usually those people that we're talking about, these groups that we're talking about, that get left behind, because that mindset is really alive and well.
If I may, if there's not someone in line to speak, I think that would be a really good time to give you all a 5 to 10 minute break. And that would be very helpful for us to, so I can confer with Ms. Villavicencio as we're trying to piece these together with taking the what you're suggesting from this other one and trying to put it into give us a moment to put it into a statement so that you can actually have the visual of seeing this to talk through it. I would also agree that the word dismantle is a stronger word than barriers. It is getting at the same thing, but in the spirit of wanting to do something that is a bold and very direct statement, that is a word that would provide that for you.
Ms. Foutakis, I do have Ms. Brill and the superintendent would like to.
Okay, and then after that, then I think everyone would really appreciate a break at this point.
Go ahead, Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So I just wanted to first thank Ms. Ayala for bringing up the Guilford County School Statement. I think it's because of the color on the page and my wonderful vision that I didn't notice it before. And so I agree with what everybody said. I was going to focus in on the adults taking ownership, but I think all of the components really should be incorporated. I like what Dr. Robinson said about changing opportunities to outcomes, but I do think we have to make mention towards the end about aligning resources to create equitable outcomes for students. And I like the fact that they included employees. I know we're focusing on the students, but that one word also of employees, because when we talk about equity, we also have to acknowledge that, you know, there's been some unfairness also with the employees. So I like keeping that word in.
All right, so Ms. Foutakis, we'd like to take a 10-minute break. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get your attention before. So just before they start wordsmithing all this, I want to stress that the statement must reflect the historic systems of racism and oppression, because this is what we're seeing is the remnants of this, right? And then the other thing is just to consider, and these are not the words, but these are my words that I started using in dealing with COVID stuff. Those who are disproportionately impacted should be disproportionately resourced. Otherwise, we are not going to get to any kind of outcome. So I just want to make sure that our statement is clear about that, because so far it kind of sounds like, you know, everybody's going to be happy, kind of. And I just think we just need to acknowledge that, and then to say that each of us can be successful. Because what concerns me, and what the reason I asked Ms. Ayala what she said was because what the system will do, and these are all systems, not just ours, will pit one group against the other, right? And so everybody can be successful, right? You know, like every group you want to name. Our goal is for each group to be successful, and it should not have to be one against the other. And I want to make sure our statement has that kind of spirit in it, if not explicitly called out.
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break until 3:10.
Thank you.
Kathleen?
She's actually getting not nice.
I saw it.
smithing people that they've done their job and they're ready to restart. Ms. Furtakis?
Yes, thank you. I had to shift screens so that we could get this back to you. So if has everyone gathered? I'm unable to see.
We're all back. Yep.
Okay, thank you for your grace and patience as we tried to do some melding of what you had talked about and including the Guilford County, Guilford Schools piece. So if Ms. Villavicencio is ready to pull that up, you can, what we did was just try to meld what we were hearing being said in terms of words, phrases, and concepts, and trying to blend them together. So anything that's in blue on the screen was an insert from the Guilford definition, and then into the rest of what was there. And so this is now up here for you to take a look at. And again, there is no, you can maneuver and change any of this. It was just trying to get it put into a space that was combining what we hoped we've been hearing you indicate you would like to see included.
One initial comment that doesn't get to the meat of it, but can we change Palm Beach County Schools to the School District of Palm Beach County or something? Because although Palm Beach County Schools is singular in this case, it sounds like it doesn't go with the verb is, and some kids out there are going to say the school board doesn't know how to type.
Please phrase it however you would like to. I'll give you a moment or two if you need to just sort of absorb this and think about it, and then I'll rely on Mr. Barbieri to call on individuals.
Okay, I saw Dr. Robinson and Ms. McQuinn so far. Go ahead.
So, where did it go? We do this by sharing power with students, families, employees, and communities is what I would like. And then I still want dismantling racism and other systems of oppression. So we could do this. We do this by sharing power with students, families, employees, and communities, while dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. We acknowledge and work to we acknowledge and dismantle systems, processes, mindsets, and that perpetuate race, poverty, blah, blah, blah. So that's using dismantle twice, so I would whip out my thesaurus and come up with another word, but that's my suggestion at this point.
Ms. McQuinn, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Okay, 2 words. It's committed to creating equity. I can do this. Oh, the adults. I think Ms. Andrews spoke to that. We're talking about our adult employees. I don't know how we do that because, we often say, well, we can't do it because our parents don't do their job. I think we have to be counting on the adults who are employed by this school district, and I don't know how we do that. The other, so think about that. And the other is, I can do this. I guess I'm going to just belabor this supporting in the third line, supporting students, and come back to the enabling piece again. And Dr. Fenoy's good putting in the intentional. But I like this. But I looked, I'm looking it up again. So the kid's definition of enable. So we intentionally, but it's to give strength, power, or the ability to. So we're supporting, at least put in, intentional enabling. I don't know how we do it, but remember, supporting is just such a milquetoast word.
Ms. McQuinn, could you go back to reading the definition? A lot of times in statements like this, you want words that people can understand. So it's interesting how times we use a word and the definition breaks it down to make it simple. Maybe we use the words in the definition here so that people don't have to go look it up, if that makes sense.
So the kid's definition of enable, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is to give strength, power, or the ability to. So, so remember, this is enable in a very proactive, positive way. And I think that it's making something possible. So enabling is not strong enough, I agree, but we can say enabling how or whatever. Providing, well, Dr. Robinson said it, by giving them the power, something, just not support. And then, thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I'd like, if I may, before we lose it, I wanted to respond where it's the comment about where adults take ownership. And this is not just, what I might suggest you consider is adults within your system, because it isn't just the people who are employed by the school district. This is also including the school board and all the adults that are a part of your system.
Mrs. Whitfield and Dr. Robinson?
Thanks. I think we should go back to having that dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequality. We just have dismantling systems, processes, and mindsets, but I do think that dismantling racism is stronger, and we could add that in there. And again, I really do want to add in gender identity and sexual orientation in the perpetuate race, poverty, disability, English language status as predictors of achievement. Somewhere in there, we got to put it in there because it's very, very important. And then again, I'm also saying this one more time, the end of Marysville. I mean, I love the way that they embrace, celebrate, and honor diversity of our students, staff, parents, community members, and helping each student achieve personal and academic success. I think we should end on a positive note, number one. And number two, I want to say that differences in people is a good thing. I don't like that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. I want to know where you came from, what you've learned, how you got there. That's important. And I think I want to honor that. And I think writing it in there is really important.
If I can give some context on the Marysville one, since you've raised it several times, you probably actually have heard of this school district. About 5 years ago, they made the national news because of the school shooting that happened at their middle school involving Native American students and Native American leaders in the children who were part of families who were leaders in this community. This school district has a significant percentage of Native Americans on as a part of their school population, and is part of this school district is on the reservation. So it has it created there was a lot of discrimination and racism that came out when this happened in the reactions that people had to this. I mean, it was a horrifying situation, and this was the result of the community coming together and basically saying we must recognize that we have differences. These differences should be honored, and it's incorporating some Native American approach to how we do healing. And so their statement is incorporating some of that. So it is positive, and just since you have brought it up a couple of times in this conversation, it would be helpful to have some of the context around where that came from.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So I have a couple of things. So the first thing is on the second line where it says for student learning outcomes. I think I wanted to say student learning and outcomes. So, I mean, that's just a thought that we can debate. So then so Ms. McQuinn, can you tell us, it was 3 components of the definition of enable. Because I think to Dr. Fenoy's point, maybe we use those components in here instead of the word enable, because it included power.
Right, this was the kids' definition, which was, okay, people, I'm not going to lose it. You know, oh, here we go. To give strength, power, or the ability to do something.
Okay, so I'm really clear. I don't want to say give power. I want to say share power. Because I think a lot, like some of the conflict between students and teachers that end in referrals to the classroom and stuff is a power struggle. And it's a lot of power struggles that happen. But so I want to say share power because we each have a role, and maybe not give strength, but I don't know. Something with strength, develop strength or something. I don't really know. I'm not a good wordsmither, but let's see. And then, okay, to ensure the students have what they need to be successful in school and life, we do this by, and then that's where that goes, the sharing power, whatever, and community. And to me, that's where, right after that, before this acknowledging and dismantling systems and so forth, is where we say by dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. And then the next sentence is about acknowledging and deconstructing the systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability, gender identity, is that the, and English language status as predictors of achievement. So that's my best wordsmithing at the moment.
Mrs. Andrews?
I don't want to leave out the piece at the second paragraph to put up in the first paragraph with the aligning or redistribution of resources to provide access. That has to get up in there somewhere. And so, let's see.
This is actually, you can do this as two paragraphs, two paragraphs, because you've got multiple thoughts. One of them is you're talking about your what that you're identifying, and then when you start with the word achieving, that is a how. So you can be, you're doing both. Both of these, all of these do not have to fit into one paragraph. You can do this as two.
So I would definitely want to put that piece in there with the aligning and redistributions of resources to provide access and opportunity.
Are you, do you have a preference for the word? When we were doing that, we were looking at or aligning or redistribution. Do you have a preference for one of those words?
Yeah, I like aligning. I like aligning. Mm-hmm. Both of them are good.
So can I say something? So just to talk about that part. So, okay, so first off, thank you, because I was just focused on the first paragraph. But so when I talk about the push coming to shove to bless them according to their needs and that we can all be successful, but in order to do that, we really have to redistribute. I can't say the word right now. That word. Mm-hmm. The resources, because that's how my whole thing about the people who are disproportionately impacted should be disproportionately resourced. Mm-hmm. So redistributing, there we go, would align with that. In my mind, more than aligning. Okay, and then we have, so I prefer historically marginalized as opposed to communities of color. And yeah, and that opportunity word, we need to come up with something better.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm trying to get with Mark to bring this up on the big screen instead of the PowerPoint slide. So
That some of us can see it.
Okay.
We won't talk about it.
At least it's only the eyes that went.
While they're working on that, is there a preference? We put in parentheses the word employees instead of staff. Is there a preference for one of those words? And then that goes back to this issue of how we're qualifying the word adults.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I would,
In our system.
I would prefer staff. If you're asking on that question, I think employees it's not, just conveys that whole financial relationship. I don't know. I don't like it as much. But I wanted to go back to, are we putting, I don't see the stuff that I said in there. So are we adding that to the bottom that I just can't see it? Or how do I get to what I wanted to say in there? You tell me how that works. Like gender identity is one thing, sexual orientation is another thing that needs to go in there as a separate thing. And then at the bottom, I was talking about that whole positive spin. Also, I don't know why we haven't, why we got rid of the part of the, from Franklin County that I really liked, and I know Dr. Robinson really liked, the piece on dismantling racism. I think that should be in there. So I don't know how to get those up there, but you feel free to add them. If people don't like what I'm saying, tell me that. But otherwise, I'd like to see it in there.
Okay, so let's take those one at a time. Underneath the second paragraph of the how, there was the highlighted piece from Marysville that you're talking about. You can conclude your statement with that if you would like to. That can easily be just inserted in there for the moment so that you can have the visual of it. The second one that you talked about is looking at this list that's up in the first paragraph and wanting to ensure that, I think, remind me again, which things you wanted to make sure that were included that are not?
Dismantling racism?
No, this was the list of
sexual orientation. Sexual orientation.
Okay, so that's the one that was not captured.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm just needing to make sure, Ms. Via, because this is very small on my screen, and trying to make sure that that I'm seeing that it's also being captured there. And then the third one was the lines through it, the last part of the first paragraph, dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. That can be reinserted up. Would you be wanting to put that at the very top or inserting it in another spot in that first paragraph?
I thought it fit at the top. I'm trying to find where it fit before. I don't see it as well as I did before.
We had it up at the top where it was following the school district of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. What we were looking at was the Guilford one and basically just inserted that similar phrase, but we can reinsert this up there and you can take a look at how those two meld where you would be deleting words and inserting.
I think you could just do a second sentence. So the school district of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling racism and other systems of oppression. We will create equitable and inclusive schools where adults take ownership for student learning and outcomes.
Vicencio, did you get that?
Thank you.
Yes, please bear with me. If there's something I do not capture, please tell me. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a moment to see how this is landing on you with additional thoughts, comments.
Ms. Furtakis, my question is, you started off by saying the first paragraph is the what and the second one is the how, but it seems like we got a whole bunch of hows in the first paragraph. It's starting with, we do this by. I mean, if we're going to keep them separate,
Yeah.
then, and it looks like we have
Yeah.
some overlap in the two paragraphs. We're using, the dismantling, in two different places. It's just.
Yes,
I
you are
think-
correct.
I think when we started talking about this, a lot of us didn't realize we had two paragraphs. We were looking at one, trying to fit words from the second paragraph into the first one. But so now we've got too much, I think, in one or the other.
And this is why we wanted you to see it all as a visual so that you can start doing that honing in and paring down where things should be.
Mrs. McQuinn?
So if we stick strictly to the what, then we will create equitable and inclusive schools. Well, then the adults taking ownership for student learning, that's a how.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yes.
our what should just be straightforward. And then how are we going to do that? Well, our adults, and I just give up on the employee staff thing. Do what feels good to everyone.
Would one of you be willing to read this out loud? Because believe it or not, it does make a difference when you're actually hearing it and seeing how it sounds. I know it's a little challenging with there, but if someone would be willing to give their best effort, that would be helpful.
I'll try. Since I'm straight in front of it and my eyes can see it now that he made it bigger. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. We will create equitable and inclusive schools where adults take ownership for student learning and outcomes and ensure students have what they need to be successful in school and life. We do this by supporting students, families, staff, and communities and acknowledging and dismantling systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, poverty, disability, English language status, gender identity, and sexual orientation as predictors of achievement. Achieving racial equity requires proactive and continuous investment in communities of color or historically marginalized groups who have endured centuries of systemic oppression. Palm Beach County Schools is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white advantage, to hearing and elevating underrepresented voices by sharing power, recognizing and eliminating bias, and aligning or redistributing resources to provide access and opportunity to historically marginalized groups. And we will embrace, celebrate, and honor the diversity of our students, staff, parents, and community members in helping each student achieve personal and academic success.
I actually really like it. I feel like it's getting there.
Yes, it is. It makes a difference when you read it. Thank you, Mr. Barbieri.
I had something.
Dr. Robinson?
So while we're adding to the list, mindsets that perpetuate race, ethnicity, we missed that. And then when it says English language status, I think that should be standard American English status, because some people will say that students whose home language is African American English do not have a asterisk next to their English language status, but we do, right? Which is part of our reading difficulty because the system doesn't acknowledge our language. So I would request that we consider putting standard American in front of English language status.
Mrs. McQuinn, you want to comment on that?
It's my understanding when we see English language referring to what we often say ELL, English as a second language, right?
And so the point that I keep making is that children whose home language is African American English, which is a language, actually should qualify for English language learner status and get the supports that would accompany that, but there's no meta decree or anything else that says that should be done. I'm hoping that we will get there as an educational institution, that we will embrace that, right? But that's why I include that there. I mean, if you have some other words that would acknowledge that, then, I mean, have both what? Have English language status and standard English? That's a bit much, but I think if you say standard American English language status, that does not include children who are qualifying for ELL? To me, it does, but, I mean, in what way? No, I'm saying children who speak Haitian Creole, right? They're going to fit in this category, whether I say standard American English language status or English language status. They're still going to fit. The people who don't fit in this that I'm conscious of are students whose home language is African American English. There might be some others too that I'm not processing, but that's what I'm saying. If it's standard American English language status, I think that includes ELL plus.
Ms. McQuinn?
Can we just say language status?
Okay.
Thank
I think
you.
I can, yeah.
Let's decide on the historically marginalized groups. We're going to take out communities of color and just put that parenthesis, or that phrase in there instead?
Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
Is language status a thing? Officially?
Yes,
It's like
language status is a thing, and that actually addresses a whole range of things. If you take English out of it, but you just talk about language status, we have specific federal funding that is for students who are English language learners. We also are careful to not talk about foreign languages; they are world languages. We're also careful, in our district, we never talked about English as a second language because English was often the third or fourth language that our students were learning when they came to us as immigrants and refugees. So you have covered the broad range of what's being discussed here when you say language status.
At the end of the third line on the first paragraph, we all agree to add the word "and," so we can take the question mark away. Yes?
No, we don't. I don't
agree.
I don't, Mr. Barbieri. We will create equitable and inclusive schools. Because the others are how. Wait a minute. We will create equitable and inclusive schools and ensure students have what they need to be successful in school and life. That other stuff that's in there is a how again, between. Right?
So we have to move it to the
Let me
bottom?
say it again. We will create equitable and inclusive schools and ensure students have what they need to be successful in school and life.
And then you're going to take the how part and move it down. Move it
Yeah,
down
put
to
that
the
how
bottom.
down.
Okay, I like that.
Do you want another paragraph with the "we do this by," since we're now taking the what and a how, putting it in the same paragraph? We do this by supporting. That's a how, isn't it?
That's a how, yes.
So maybe that's a second paragraph. So we have three paragraphs here.
Okay. The how paragraph is just really long and the what paragraph is really short? Okay.
The what can be short. That's actually a good point because the what, I mean, you're being very direct about what the problem is. It's racism and the need to dismantle it and other systems of oppression and inequity. That is the root of the inequities that are happening in the system. And by identifying the root, you then are able to spend more time talking about the how.
So Mr. Furtakis, can you see what we have on the screen?
It's very small for me, and I keep refreshing on my phone so that I can try and keep this. This is, one of the disadvantages of here. It would be great if someone would like to read what you have at this point.
Oh,
Well, before we do that, can someone tell me where adults take ownership for student learning
Yeah, I was going
should
to ask
go
the
now?
same question. Where are we putting that?
That's a how. How are we doing that? Adults are taking responsibility.
I do think that the achieving racial equity should be the beginning part of the how, because I like that. And then the rest of it should just bump under.
Can you say something? Can I say something right here?
Let's move that.
Move it.
Let's change that order and see what that looks like.
That's what I was going to say, change the order.
We taking away the word privilege and putting in the word advantage. So scratch the word. We using aligning or redistributing resources.
There seems to be some discussion about around, if I'm remembering correctly, that both words might be considered for inclusion. We had looked at it as an either or, but it can be an and.
What about allocating?
Who said what? I can't.
Allocating?
So, Ms. Vertakis, they're suggesting allocating or aligning or redistributing. Which of those words do you think?
So the issue is that what it is the modifier to the allocating, aligning, or redistributing, because you're recognizing that there is already disproportionality in how things are being distributed, that there is bias included in it, that it is preferencing some groups over the others. So you could use any of those words as long as you're saying that it's in response to this problem that is existing.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Sorry, I have so many thoughts. I was just looking at like what are the disenfranchised groups in America to make sure we're not missing anybody. And I was thinking, what do you guys think about? I know this would be a big problem, but documented status. So like whether or not they're documented in this country, because that's a big group of people who, you know, especially in our schools, are very nervous and afraid. What do you think? Just putting that out there.
That would be good to consider including, because according to federal law, we do not ask for student status to provide an education for them. However, we recognize that they are also experiencing a number of barriers, and that because of their status, there are supports that they are not, or their families are not receiving.
All right, Ms. Villasensi, if you can put some, let's go back up and finish up allocating,
That's
aligning,
where I
and
was.
redistributing. So
I
what are
wanted
we
to
using
say
there?
something there.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yeah, and that's where I was going to say, we'll keep the redistributing of, because I think when you say allocating, we're already allocating funds and aligning, but we've got to go back now and do it right. So that might be the better word. We got to go back and redistribute.
What about if we put and fairly distributing resources to provide access and opportunity? Fairly redistribute, take away the
doesn't
re,
mean
just put
anything.
fairly distributing resources.
We say we do that already.
Okay.
Right, Mr. Barbier, okay, so how if eliminate, and, let me find the words again. You got rid of that already, you're so quick, Kathleen.
Allocating and aligning were the
Yeah,
words.
here's what I want to say, eliminating bias and aligning and or redistributing resource allocation.
Aligning and or redistributing
Resource
resources.
allocations.
Everybody okay with that?
If you're aligning resources, what you're doing is you're aligning them to meet need. That would be the context that you would want to come across. Redistribution is acknowledging that it's not equitably distributed now, and that would be an intentional action.
Correct, and so if we say aligning or redistributing resource allocation, then we're not just talking money, we're talking all resources and how we allocate them. But I
Right,
can be done
and
with
you would
that.
want to ensure that you're aligning based on need.
Yeah, well, we say to provide access and whatever we do. I think we're saying why we're doing it.
Great.
Take out the word allocating, Ms. Villasencio. And we want aligning and redistributing, or aligning and / or redistributing?
I'm
And
still
/
sticking
or?
with redistributing.
Can we just say distributing instead of redistributing?
Don't ask me what's wrong
Well,
with that word.
you currently distribute resources.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that's currently being done. The issue is that they need to be reallocated. A reallocation of how those resources are distributed is taking place because it's not equitable right now.
So then with reallocating, I mean, I think it's the re part that's important to me.
Currently on the screen, Ms. Furtakis, we have and realigning or redistributing or reallocating. So obviously we have a little bit too much there.
Okay, so
Redistributing.
Yeah, let's just pick one. They all kind of.
My personal preference is that you take allocating out of the equation because the other two words are really getting more to the point of what it is you're trying to address.
Okay, they have reallocating. I don't know if that makes a difference. Reallocating and redistributing is probably the same.
Adding the prefix re is definitely an action that is saying that the current system would be changing. And so now you're back to which word is it that you all prefer
Yes.
to be communicating what you want to convey.
Okay, let's make a decision here. Realigning, redistributing, reallocating. Which words you want to use?
Redistributing.
Redistributing? Everybody okay with redistributing?
Yeah.
Ms. Villasencio, would take out the other words, please?
Okay, now I need a new word instead of opportunity. and redistributing resources to provide access and I can't do opportunity. We already have opportunity.
What if we take power out of the first part and stick it down there? So you say hearing and elevating unrepresented voices by recognizing and eliminating bias, redistributing resources to provide access and power to historically marginalized groups.
So I kind of like the intent, but here I think this statement says where we're trying to go, right? And so the only thing that comes in my head at the moment is to provide access and equitable outcomes. And I think if I'm not an English major, I think it's before historically marginalized groups, but I'm not certain about that instead of two. But I'm just saying opportunity is not my word. I'm not sure.
So replace opportunity with equitable outcomes to
Yes.
historically marginalized groups?
Yeah, that's my thought. It's definitely not opportunity.
Everybody okay with that? Take away the word opportunity and put in equitable outcomes?
Are we going to give this to Diana Fetterman at some point? Because she does such a good job with having.
Provide access to what?
What are we giving it to her for?
She's so good at the reading, making it read and be appropriate with all the
Yeah.
appropriate words. She's just great at that.
No, we're not giving it to anybody to change our words.
I mean, just so you could do something like the 4 and the 2. Like that's
Oh.
something that she would be good at.
Go ahead,
Do you know what I mean?
Mrs. McQuinn.
Okay, to provide access to what? Or for what? Access
gotcha.
to what? Yeah.
Why don't we just take away and just put provide equitable outcomes to historically marginalized groups? Take away the word access and. Okay? Take away the words access and opportunity and leave in equitable outcomes.
You get ready to testify, Marcia?
Okay, now we're in that third paragraph where we have a non-sentence there at the beginning that.
I do think it's equitable outcomes for historically marginalized groups, though.
Yes, it would be 4.
Okay, now the last paragraph starts with a non-sentence, where we have this, where adults take ownership for student learning and outcomes.
We do this by?
So here I go again.
Go ahead, Mrs.
The
McQuinn.
adults, I don't know who they are, but whoever these people, I mean, I know who they are. The adults will take ownership for student, I don't know, learning. I don't know. See, learning and outcomes doesn't, I'm sorry, Dr. Wright, it doesn't really make sense. So for student learning,
There hasn't been an explicit highlighting of social emotional issues here. I'm wondering if the term well-being could be used somewhere. Student well-being.
Yes, please. I think that's a great idea.
I'm going to go back to Austin again, but and do this what you want, but it's students' academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs.
Where do you think that should go, Mrs. McQuinn?
It's at the end, right?
Well, when Mary was pointing out that we hadn't gone back to those emotional, et cetera, so wherever it has to do with outcomes, I just thought that covered them so well.
Can you say that one more time, Ms. McQuinn, so I can write that down?
Sure. Students, that would be S apostrophe, academic intelligence. Sorry, I could have been an English teacher too. Academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs.
Should be S apostrophe instead of apostrophe S, Mrs. McQuinn.
Uh-oh.
That would be S apostrophe, multiple students.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Okay, so.
Instead of adults will take ownership, shouldn't it say the district shall take on, the district will take ownership for student learning? The district? Talks
That
about
would be
what,
inclusive of everyone, because that would include the school board.
Okay, where's the sharing power part?
Up a paragraph,
Got lost.
a little bit higher.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So then, here somehow it's this, okay. Okay, I could live with school district, but I was thinking everyone, the adults in the system, outside the system, and the students will work in partnership, but then, never mind, scratch it. Because some people will interpret that as saying it's their responsibility instead of ours, so never mind. I just talked myself out of that.
I'd like to suggest at this point, if someone would be willing to read through what we have at this juncture, I think that would be helpful. You've got a pretty powerful statement going here.
So can we just decide on staff versus employees?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Staff.
Yep, go right ahead.
Before we read it, Ms. Furtakis, we need to fix the third paragraph. There's a lot of question marks and other stuff in there that we can get that done first. So it currently says the school district of Palm Beach County will take ownership for student learning and outcomes, supporting, empowering, enabling students, families, staff, employees. So we need to figure out whether we're going to leave empowering, enabling, or supporting in there to start with.
Can I make a suggestion? The school district of Palm Beach County will take ownership for students' academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs.
That's great. We can move that right into there.
By, and then choose your word. Wait, where'd it go? Empowering, enabling, whatever, and then the students, families, staff, employees, and communities. Yeah, like, I need an English major because we got to run on sentence. But I'm just saying.
I like empowering. I like the way that's like a
Empowering?
little. Yeah, I do. I don't know. It seems more like you're giving them the power over their own destiny, which I love.
Everybody okay with empowering? We'll take away supporting and enabling. Okay, Ms. Vicencio, we scratch those.
So let me just say, I'll go for that because we already talked about sharing power. Let me tell you what people have said to me when I've used the word empowering in the community is that there's an assumption that it was ours to give, right?
Oh.
But because we have sharing power in there, then I think I'm good. I don't think I get pushback. So.
Okay. And then I still think we should get rid of employees. I never wanted to be an employee, but being a part of staff is like being part of a family.
But Ms. McQuinn doesn't like.
No, I yield to it. I just, when I look it up, I was very conscious of this as a school principal in referring to staff because you got your custodial staff, you have your instructional. I'm fine with staff. It's okay. I really looked it up. They mean the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, can I tweak some more? I need
Go ahead,
to
Dr. Robbins.
So instead of empowering, now this is, I need a new, okay, so instead of empowering, creating, don't type this because it's not fitting in the sentence right, but it's creating an environment where students, families, staff, and communities can find their power in order to. Okay? So I know. See, I need bullets before
I was going to say, that's going to be,
Yeah.
the sentences are long. The sentence
Yeah,
is long.
the concept,
We need a period.
the concept Dr. Robinson is referring to that I've heard expressed often is people talking about creating the conditions for
There we go.
these things to happen.
Okay,
Could write that.
Fix, see, I can't do this. I need bullets, and then I can turn it into a paragraph. But
Help.
so by creating the conditions where students, families, staff, and communities can find their power, or find their power. Maybe not can. Period. Then we need a period because period. And then it's like, that's, you got another one? I love power. I don't know, but power works for me. I understand power.
Seems trendy.
Yeah, we added up there. Power is very important. Power is why we have the problems we have.
Board members, what do you want to do with this?
I have a comment.
Ms. Ayala?
I just want to point it out that we have dismantling twice and historically marginalized groups twice, which is fine. I'm just pointing it out. And when it reads, I don't want it to sound redundant and take away from what we're trying to get across. Because it's just heavy right now. We got to trim some of this down.
I personally don't like find their power. I mean, I don't know what that exactly means, and I don't know what the people that are going to read it know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I need another
Empowering
word.
sounded better when we had it that way before.
I
But
think up there with sharing power is good. Right there, can we find another?
Sharing power is good. So,
Yeah, I don't love find their
and I
power.
actually
either.
don't like find their power either because it's really
Find some
to
another
act
word.
upon it.
Barbara, you got the
To use
the
the
How,
word.
how about the word agency?
There we go.
Because
That's
where,
a
Ms.
lovely-
Furtakis? Where are you talking
Instead of
agency?
power.
Find their agency?
yeah, it's what when people have agency, that means they do take control over their what's happening
good.
in their life. They have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I don't think-
And many times students will talk about the fact that they don't have agency, which they often equate to not having voice in
Yeah, we
something.
like that.
I don't like it because I don't think people are going to understand
Well,
it.
no, but
I think that we've gotten too high on the confusion scale on a lot of these things. We're supposed to be at like a 6th grade reading level, right?
Well, who's the audience for this?
Us, teachers.
I hope they better than 6th grade reading level.
So this is one of the reasons why this is a draft, because you're going to be taking it out to people who will be calling out some of these things. We did that in one of the examples that I provided to you with both a Spanish language version and an English version. we actually centered the Spanish words to get to where we were, because we got hung up on some of these phrases that we use all the time, like in partnership with, and there was no good translation of it. But when we looked at the word together, that worked for everybody. And so it achieved all of those things. So what we're trying to do is get some words in here and sentences that we can take a look at in total. And one of the filters we'd be looking at is how much educationese is in here, how many words need to be explained, and recognizing that. And you can flag those for when they go out to be reviewed to say, is there something that we should consider instead?
In the fourth paragraph that starts with the word "and," why don't we start it with the school district of Palm Beach County will acknowledge and dismantle acknowledges and will dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race with the rest of that. So the school district of Palm Beach County acknowledges and will dismantle.
Now we have three
And will dismantle.
Acknowledges what?
Acknowledges systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race. We acknowledge that we have those, and we're going to dismantle them.
So
No?
can I,
Go ahead, Ms.
I'm
Dr.
still
Roberts.
stuck before, so communities develop agency and voice. Because it took me a long time to understand agency, but agency and voice together, I think people get better. Develop agency and voice. Because this is a draft, right? So it's, yeah.
Can I go back to how we have double historically marginalized groups?
Go ahead, Ms.
I was just thinking maybe we could cut off the last one and just make it say resources to provide equitable outcomes, period, since we already said it.
We already said them, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause we said it at the top, and then now we say it
So
at the
take
bottom.
the
Second paragraph,
one at
just a period.
the bottom.
Oh,
Go
I'm
down
sorry.
4 lines from where you are.
Got it. So take this out.
Just put a period after outcomes.
Or you could just say for all. I don't know. Up to you. Or just equitable outcomes. Okay.
We have 3 dismantles in here, just saying that.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Microphone, Dr. Robbins. Ms. Vertakis has got to hear what you're saying.
Okay, acknowledges the existence of and will dismantle.
Acknowledges the existence of, yeah, okay. Acknowledges the existence of and will dismantle. Is that better, Mrs. Whitfield?
Yeah.
All right, we ready to read this?
Go for it.
Yes?
Yes, please.
It's cool.
Oop,
Uh-oh.
Maybe not. Just kidding.
Get it. Meeting adjourned. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity. We will create equitable and inclusive schools that ensure students have what they need to be successful in school and life. Achieving racial equity requires proactive and continuous investment in historically marginalized groups who have endured centuries of systemic oppression. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white advantage, to hearing and elevating underrepresented voices by sharing power, recognizing and eliminating bias, and redistributing resources to provide equitable outcomes. The School District of Palm Beach County will take ownership for students' academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs by creating conditions where students, families, staff, and communities can develop agency and voice. The School District of Palm Beach County acknowledges the existence of and will dismantle systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, ethnicity, poverty, disability, language status, undocumented status, gender identity, and sexual orientation as predictors of achievement. We will embrace, celebrate, and honor the diversity of our students, staff, parents, and community members in helping each student achieve personal and academic success.
I love it.
Do we want to change "we" at the fourth paragraph, or we want to leave "we" or put back in the school district of Palm Beach County again?
Oh, I like that. Sorry, the school district. Well, okay, I'm sorry.
Go
My
ahead.
turn to say something again.
Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
I'm sorry, I forgot already. Go ahead.
You could
I
say,
remember.
as a district, we will embrace.
Okay. As a district with a capital D. Got it.
Don't hate me, but you can't start with a prepositional phrase.
Of course not.
English teacher.
I thought of
Okay.
it again. I'm ready.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I was just
Depends on
thinking,
which English we use it. Okay, so.
we're talking a lot about students here, and I was just thinking, should we put a mention about, I know we have a lot of issues around positions of power within this district being shifted to people of, black and brown people, to use Dr. Robinson's words. So should that be in here somewhere about the positions of the employees? I don't know. We've talking a lot about students, and so I'm trying to figure out, did we cover it well enough, that part? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I don't know.
No.
So I'm saying that is there a piece about, because we're talking about students. I think we are also employers. So how do we address the fact that we employ a bunch of people and we make differences in the outcomes of the community based on who we employ? Does that make sense? So that we're representing the black and brown people in the community. Like I said, we don't have a lot of people that are Asian in positions of leadership, and someone talked to me about that this week. So are we addressing that piece of our job too? The impact that we have on the community by who we employ and how we spend our money. Like there's a whole piece of hiring outside consultants that are, the minority-owned businesses. So making sure that we include that piece in there.
In thinking about what you're saying, which is a great point, I'm looking at paragraph 2 where you talk about resources and redistributing resources, because resources is much more broad, as we've talked about, than just money or finances. It's your people. Where are your people placed? How are they being effectively positioned to be able to impact students most in need? It's also time. It's also your spaces. How are you using them? And it's power and privilege. So when I'm looking at this, I see multiple places where the impact of what you're wanting to accomplish, because it is dependent on your people and this in the system to be making this happen, I see that it is covered. But if it's something that you want to highlight more, that would be one of the things I'd be including on page 3 with the how that's going to be shared with insight, because I know that's going to come up in your strategic plan. You cannot embed equity in a strategic plan without having an entire section that's talking about how are we going to be making this happen through our people now, and how we are allocating resources to support them, and whether it's professional development, whether it's placement of teachers, whether it's realigning what the staffing looks like in buildings. It covers all of those things.
Right.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay, so on the third paragraph, the only thing that's nudging at me is, so we take ownership for the academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs by, but there's much more to that than just creating the conditions where they have agency and voice, right? And so something keeps saying, I want to add, and this, I think this makes the sentence too complicated, but I want to say, like, in part by creating conditions where students da-da-da-da-da. So somehow, and I don't know if that means we split this into 2 sentences, but just to say that we're going to do that, create these conditions, and that's one of the many things that we need to do to have students take on, everybody take ownership for these outcomes. Does that make sense?
Ms. Furtakis?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. One of the ways to strengthen that is to take the word can out. You're saying basically that's a word that indicates, well, they can do that. They might do that. Whereas if you just say that they develop.
Yeah.
Just develop.
Yeah, that's
develop.
good. I'm glad you said that. So will develop is good, but I'm saying above that in order to for the district to take ownership for the students' academic intelligence, emotional intelligence, and socio-emotional needs, we must do more than just create the conditions where they have voice and agency. We have to do more than that. And so that makes it sound like that's what we need to do, just create the conditions where the students, family, staff, and communities will develop agency and voice, and everything's taken care of. That's
the creating conditions. One of the conditions you're creating is eliminating systems of oppression. You're eliminating racist structures, institutional racism, structural racism, etc. And when you're doing that, you're creating the conditions for success. You're creating conditions where agency and voice will be developed, and when that happens, we know that success follows. So I'm not sure if there's a different way you want to phrase that, but the conditions you are referring to in this statement are eliminating what you say at the top, which is dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequity.
Why don't we get rid of the words by creating conditions? So it just says the school district of Palm Beach County will take ownership for students' academic, and then I was thinking we should change that word to success instead of having intelligence twice. Academic success, emotional intelligence, and social emotional needs, where students, families, staff, and communities will develop agency and voice. So forget about by creating conditions, just where this will happen.
And I got something. And the last dismantle, can we use eliminate? So we've got 3 dismantles up there.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Mr. Barbieri?
Yes, who said that?
I did.
Sayala.
Thank you. I thought of break down systems or disassemble somewhere on one of them, possibly. Break down, undo, disassemble, just so it's not so repetitive.
Which one are you looking at? The top one up there?
I'm just throwing out words. I haven't placed where they would go. But
that's good. Disassembling. That sounds good to me.
Disassembling structures rooted in what advantage that one would make sense there.
Right.
One of the things you could consider in the interest or in the spirit of wanting to use positive and affirming language, instead of dismantle, you could talk about recreate, reimagine, reinvent.
Oh, yeah. I thought of that too.
Ooh, I like that.
Instead of re.
Now, that's kind of crazy, though. We're going to reimagine the structures rooted in white advantage. That's like that's kind of scary. I'm going to go for the disassembling.
So placement matters in the order that you have them. But if you're talking about again, just at some place in here, maybe one of your dismantles. If this isn't the right space, maybe one of the 3 that might be a place to consider a re-word instead.
So could we be
Keep
positive?
the first dismantle. Keep that one.
I was going to
up.
say reimagine racism. That's not a good plan.
No, but wait, if we say transforming, the school is committed to transforming structures rooted in. Can we not be transforming those structures? Then it's positive.
Yeah, but it ain't positive. We need to tear this mess down.
Oh, well, then we have dismantled. That would be the problem.
So we got disassembling as an option.
I like transforming. That's really nice. Transforming structure.
Go ahead, Mrs. McQuinn.
I'm doing it too. Break down.
Well, because I really do. I mean, we've talked about transformation and how we have this opportunity to do this post-pandemic. And let's do it.
So we're transforming it to what, though? Because if we're going to say transforming structures rooted in white advantage, you need to tell me what we're changing them to.
Why can't you just say
White
removing?
advantage. To hearing and elevating underrepresented voices. Right?
That's a tool to get to the equitable outcomes, right?
There is also another way to look at repeating some words. It is a very powerful and appropriate word, and using it more than once emphasizes the point that you're trying to make. And that is a literary tool that has been used for emphasis. And in this case, that would be appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish.
So we stick with dismantling, board members? I can't hear you, Mrs. Andrews.
We got rid of the third one, so I think I could live with 2.
Okay. So we'll go back to committed to dismantling, structures rooted in white advantage.
Can I ask a question? Could you not, the school district of Palm Beach County is committed to disassembling or dismantling structures rooted in white advantage, period. And then create a sentence that talks about what you're going to replace it with. Does that make sense? Like transforming to make sure that you are evaluating underrepresented groups by sharing power. So just make a definitive statement that we will dismantle that structure, and then we're going to transform or reinvent or something that then makes sure that all of these other underrepresented groups, is right. So you just make a definitive statement, and then the next part is the next part.
What about switching it to break down? Committed to breaking down structures rooted in white advantage?
No, I don't want this breaking down.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to replace it with a new form of racism.
I was going to say, I don't want to replace it. I want to.
Transform, and we will achieve this by hearing, it's advantage period. And then we will transform our system by making sure that underrepresented groups have power sharing, recognizing, it's just, I think you want to make a declarative statement, just make the statement, and then you start building because again, you want to tear it down and rebuild.
So by doing that, what you're also doing is highlighting the foundation of white advantage in all this. So you're saying dismantle, where are we? Dismantle the structures rooted in white advantage, period, boom, and then we will transform our system. I think that's worth playing with. I can't do English well.
So see, I like that and have the 2 because we're acknowledging, and we're all trying to find different words for dismantling. Let's just use it again.
Yeah, put it back in there, Ms. Villasensi. Just put dismantling back in there and take all that ors out of there, please.
So I have a suggestion. Okay, once you get that caught up. So for that last sentence, okay. Now I lost what it was. Okay, so instead of we will transform our system by hearing and elevating, just say we will elevate underrepresented voices by sharing, and take out the transforming. So we will elevate underrepresented voices by sharing blah, blah, blah.
I feel pretty strongly about transforming.
Really?
Let's fight it out.
So then we will transform, but transforming and elevating just...
Ms. Villasensi, put it back for a minute, please.
I don't think we should transform underrepresented voices.
We will transform our system by hearing and elevating underrepresented voices.
I like that.
And then it's a comma, because by sharing power is a separate thing.
We like transform.
I think we need transform in there somewhere. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Instead of having a new sentence, though, we will transform. Now we're getting back to the we's again. Why did we put a comma after the word advantage?
Oh, that's a long sentence. School district.
It's not a long sentence because the school district of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white advantage by transforming our system.
And
transforming. And transforming.
And after
transforming our
advantage,
system.
put and. Transforming our system, or transform.
Transforming.
That's good.
Whew.
That's a good sentence. It's really nice.
Can we still go back to the academic intelligence, emotional intelligence? I feel like there's too many intelligences.
Yeah, what did you have in there, Miss?
I put success. but
Success,
I'm happy
academic
to-
success instead of academic intelligence?
Students' academic success. I mean, we can change that. I just thought it was weird to have two intelligences, and then the third one's not an intelligence.
But there are different kinds of intelligences. But again, fight with me about it. But
It's just not because it doesn't
play
mean the
nice,
right
no
thing.
fighting.
I'm just thinking it looks weird.
But since intelligence is somewhat subjective, why not just say the school district department county will take ownership of students' academic mastery?
Mastery.
Mastery.
Like that. That's nice.
Don't we have elementary schools have mastery report cards? We want people to get skills and master them.
It's a good one, Doc.
All right. He's done. Send him his check.
Why do we have we want to get rid of that question mark at the end of that second line? Yes? You okay with creating conditions? Yes?
No, it was just me. I took it out because I thought it would make sense to get rid of that whole, we're only making conditions where they can do it, but we're not actually wanting them to do it, or they have to have their own their own agency to do it on their own. I was just trying to fix that problem.
Can I ask, is the word agency too fancy?
I was going to ask Miss Ayala how you would translate it, because I feel like that would get
I
lost
do want to
so
tell
bad.
you that someone texted me,
Someone.
letting me know that agency used in this manner is an SAT word.
To your point, however, it is a concept that needs some explanation, and that would be something you would want to consider. What you ultimately want is a statement that is going to require very minimal explanation as to what your intent is for people. And you also may have to, in a couple of places, do some more fleshing out or provide a definition for what this means when you're talking about it. And I think some of that will come up as you're, again, taking this. You've got a really solid draft here at this point to be taking it out to stakeholders. So let's make sure that the major concepts that you want captured are in here. You're 95% there, to then be, reading it again as a whole. And again, this is why we're doing it as a draft, so that you are going to be getting additional input that will help clarify a couple of things.
So are we going to, somebody just tell me no, so I'll let it go, but are we going to create the portrait of a graduate?
Yes.
I like it.
Okay, and so then would this, whatever it gets called, would this not somewhere make reference to it? Because that's what we're trying to do. I'm just asking a question.
I think so. And I'm also so I will say yes to that. I would like for the group to consider one word change. It says, the school district department council will take ownership of students' academic mastery, emotional intelligence, social needs by creating environments where students, families, and staff and communities will develop agency and voice. And the reason, conditions is another one of those things, it's hard to, what does that mean? But an environment, the home, the place where people are comfortable, they feel agency, whatever. Because if you think about it, our job is to create environments by which the rest of the organization can thrive.
Just plural? Creating environments?
Creating an environment.
An environment.
This is just a suggestion. I'm not saying it has
I
to go
like that. I like
Okay,
that
so
better.
wait, but I want plural, because what you just said, what I'm hoping we're going to do, if we're to really do this, to really try to overcome this generation, the educational debt, then we're going to have to help support to have these kind of environments outside of the school too. Not that we will do it by ourselves, but we're going to need to provide support so that for homes, for community-based agencies, and so forth. If we really are going to do this, right? So I want to create environments.
I don't have an opinion on that.
That's me.
That's fine. Environments.
Okay, this is, are there any other words, concepts, or phrases that have not been captured? Because we need to pull this together, do a final reading of the draft, and then give you a few minutes to queue up what your next steps are and prepping for your next workshop on April 14th.
I'm still stuck on agency. I wanted to hear if Miss Ayala knows how to translate that. Is it possible?
Yeah, you can. It would be agencia propia, like self-agency. And I do think it could be a little bit high concept to explain to communities at large, but we have to consider that. Do we want to educate folks at that level right off the gate, or do we want to do something that's more already known? Because agency is something you need to learn and understand and capture for yourself. So that's my only thing. There is a way to translate it. It just would take a little explaining, I think. For some.
Thank you.
It's a higher level social emotional learning skill, and that does take some explanation. But again, this is something that you could, at this point, if we're stuck on it, we can underline it as something that we particularly would like input on for a potential different word or concept.
Are we looking at the last one where we put aside the prepositional phrase? Are we doing that part? Because if we are, I have something to substitute for diversity, which is not one of our colleagues' favorite words, and it also brings in something else. So embrace, celebrate, and honor the diverse cultural histories of our student staff. You're always saying cultural histories. So honor the diverse cultural histories, plural, of our students, staff. Just a thought.
Mark, can you bring that up a little bit on our screen, please?
Thank you. Got it.
So I'm just dealing with, I'm trying to be a team player, so I'm accepting the diversity word, but.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
What about, as a district, we embrace, celebrate, and honor the unique cultural histories of our students, staff, parents, and community members? Because I think unique speaks to, like, Deborah and I are both of African descent, but we have two different worldviews and two different world experiences. It's unique. And I think that's something that I think would make sense.
Okay, so are we embracing, celebrating, honoring their cultural histories, or them? So, but I don't hear that here. I see the unique cultural histories of them. I want to embrace, celebrate, and honor them, along with the culture that they bring with them. So, I would leave.
How about honor our students in their unique cultural histories? Honor our students, staff, parents, and community members in their unique cultural histories.
It could be and instead of in.
Yeah. So can we lock in that we're keeping agency? Or do I need to debate that now? Somebody just needs to tell me.
What was suggested is that for purposes of where we are right now, that perhaps we underline that word, and that would be a word we specifically ask for input from your stakeholders about what we should or what you should consider for that.
Well, we're going to ask our stakeholders all of this. I think that we need to be clear about where we stand. Because the other thing is, I'm going to just tell you now, here's my fear. When we take this to our stakeholders, which disproportionately represent the haves, right? I mean, it's just the truth, right? This might be very threatening to them. And so I'm hoping we're not going to start reversing course and saying our stakeholders said, right? So I want to be clear with the word agency, as well as the rest of the document, where we stand really as a collective, but also individually. I mean, at some point when after this is no longer a draft, if we are all sitting well with the document, because we are going to get pushback from voices that we typically respond to quickly, okay? And so, like, I kind of feel like, tell me now, because I don't want to be frustrated. And so, you know, this document, for the most part, is telling us, the school, everybody who Fenoy signs their check, and folks who connect with us, where our priorities are. I think that all those people will understand agency and voice, right? I don't have any problem with having conversations in the community about what that means, right? I don't have a problem with that. I don't know how many people know what emotional intelligence is. All right, I mean, I'm just saying. So who's the audience? So I just want to know. I want agency in there because I think it says what I want this sentence to say.
And I would agree with that. Mary, is there any documents, well, there's actually no rules preventing us. You know, part of these type of documents, that sometimes why they end up on shelves, because people can't understand the language. So why don't we tease out these fancy words and define them and make them a part of the whatever overarching document? Like, you know, like if you read a book, you know, like I've read books that are written in sort of a street vernacular. And on the back pages, it tells you what all those street words meant, so that you can understand the language. And so instead of eliminating a word like agency, why don't we include it and then, you know, explain it?
And I was actually going to suggest like a little footnote, you know, at the bottom of the statement explaining what it is, because I think you do need to explain it, Dr. Robinson. I think a lot of people won't understand it, but we want them to understand it.
I think so.
So by footnoting it or putting in a comment, you know, towards the bottom of wherever it is, you know, that's also going to help them learn a new concept.
Right. So as we go through it, we can do the asterisks for some other words too, because, you know, for me, this document is for us, right? And so I get, you know, we want to be clear with what we mean. And I actually think that along the road, maybe there's some videos where we talk about why we said these words, right? But I just want to put it out there now to get ready. So whenever, I guess it's the next meeting, when we settle on this, I'm hoping that we settle on something that everybody can carry, because there is going to be pushback. And the pushback is what has typically prevented us from moving forward, right? And that's just the truth. So
let's look at this last paragraph. I have a suggestion how to fix that with Dr. Robinson's comment about making sure we're recognizing and honoring people rather than cultural histories. So let's use my suggestion. As a district, we will honor our students, staff, parents, and community members in their unique cultural histories and ensure each student achieves personal and academic success. So move our students, staff, parents, and community members up after we will embrace, celebrate, and honor our students, staff, parents, and community members in their unique cultural histories and each student achieve personal and academic success, and ensure each student achieves personal and academic success.
So can I get an and instead of an in? So we will honor the students, staff, parents, community members and their unique cultural histories in order to ensure, or something like that. Okay, while ensuring. Okay. Yeah, okay.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to respond to Dr. Fenoy. Yes, I strongly recommend that definitions and defining what you are talking about will be a very good idea. And many documents, including equity policies, there will be a glossary at the end to make it to ensure and help with the educating part that people know what you were talking about, because there's a whole lot of people that were not a party to this conversation. And so they didn't have the benefit of seeing the thought process that has gone into this, a very thoughtful process and a great conversation. So that is always a really good idea to do. What I'm going to suggest at this point, because of our time, is would someone please read what you have, and then we're going to finish up with the last piece of this queuing up for April 14th.
I think we need to fix Mrs. McQuinn's problem with the preposition, though, before we change it.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
All right.
every single one starts with the school district of Palm Beach County, so why don't we just do that at the last one, too?
True, when we do, oh shoot, no, I can't remember, proclamations, they all start with
We
whereas.
start with whereas.
So we're going to replace as a district with the school district of Palm Beach County will embrace.
Dr. Fenoy has gone on the computer.
Dr. Fenoy's going to read it this time. Mark, can you bring it down a little bit further on the screen?
I was going to say, oh, wait, no, the second one doesn't have the school district will. I guess that's okay.
I'm going to suggest it at this point, maybe knowing that nothing will be taken out of our words, because seriously, we're going to have to combine a couple of those last two, because you can't have one sentence paragraphs. So why don't we wait and come back to
one
that?
sentence paragraphs,
Not letting
Mrs.
anybody
McQueen?
take our stuff away.
I'm telling you,
Mary?
yes, you need to. I think we do need to run this by a reading expert such as Diane
Yeah.
Fetterman. Doesn't have to be her, but
We'll get it. We'll get it. All right. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling racism and other systems of oppression and inequality. We will create equitable and inclusive schools that ensure students have what they need to be successful in school and life. Achieving racial equality requires proactive and continuous investment in historically marginalized groups who have endured centuries of systematic oppression. The School District of Palm Beach County is committed to dismantling structures rooted in white advantage and transforming our systems by hearing and elevating the underrepresented voices, sharing power, recognizing and eliminating bias, and redistributing resources to provide equitable outcomes. The School District of Palm Beach County will take ownership of students' academic mastery, emotional intelligence, and social and emotional needs by creating environments where students, families, and staff and communities will develop agency and voice. The School District of Palm Beach County acknowledges the existence of acknowledges the existence
There should be a
of
comma
okay.
after
existence of and will eliminate systems, processes, and mindsets that perpetuate race, ethnicity, poverty, disability, language status, undocumented status, gender identity, and sexual orientation as a predictor of achievement. That's a long one. As a district, we will embrace, celebrate, and honor our students, parents, and staff, and community members and their unique cultural histories while ensuring each student achieves personal and academic success. If we do that, yeah.
Can we change as a district in that last paragraph to school district of Palm Beach County, make it consistent?
Okay, so that second to last, not only is it very long, but it's one sentence. So I was suggesting that, okay, just let an English person, without taking any of our words away, make that last two pieces grammatically correct, without taking away any of our words, just making, you know how we do strikeouts when we do, yeah, keep our stuff, but use strikeouts.
that can be done, and it could be as simple as them being bullet points in the third one. So yes, you have some experts on hand who can
Greg Robinson
clean
wants
that
a
up.
bullet point.
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Furtakis.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay. So if Ms. Villavicencio is back,
I'm here.
We have. Okay, great. Could you please pull up the PowerPoint for the last two slides? And while she's doing that, I would like to invite all of you to please give her a round of applause for the incredible scribing that she has done for us today to keep this on track. All right. Okay. So your next steps that you have going forward, and the issue has been raised about key stakeholders. And this is an opportunity for you to show that you're doing things differently. And what it usually should be done is that when you're going out for something like this, you need to ensure, and this is based again on your data, which is very clear, who are the people and the groups that have been historically marginalized, and you ensure that their voices are heard as a part of this, the feedback, and that you are very much creating a way for them to be centered in providing that type of feedback to you. And there's going to be my understanding is that at your April 7th board meeting, this is going to be an agenda item to be talking about, who's going to be the lead person coordinating this, establishing the timeline and deadline for input for this to be reviewed by the board, but then you'll be scheduling adoption of this as an action item for one of your upcoming board meetings. I just want to confirm that I've got the right date. If either Mr. Tierney or Ms. Villavicencio could confirm that for April 7th.
That is correct, Mary.
Okay, terrific. And then the last part of this on the last slide is that your third workshop in this series is we're going to be doing the revisions to your mission and vision statement. And the pre-work that you already have most of this, and you'll be provided with the notes from today, and you'll have the draft of the equity statement also to take a look at. I will be providing some examples of mission and vision statements from districts that have been centering equity. Actually provided several for you back in December, so we'll resurrect those and add a few more to it. And then our outcome for that meeting is you're going to be doing pretty much what you did today, where you will be reviewing and finalizing what your mission and vision statements are to schedule those for adoption at an upcoming board meeting. And that is what I have. So I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Fenoy, Mr. Barbieri, or anyone else who has anything they would like to add to this, or any questions that the board has related to next steps.
Well, Mayor, I just want to take a moment on behalf of the school board to thank you for your facilitation today. Thank all of my entire team, and obviously my first team, which is the school board, for our participation today. And I am thankful that we've built a relationship where we can have an honest conversation and agree to disagree and keep it moving forward. And so those are my closing comments. Thank you, everybody.
We have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Ms. Ayala. All in favor?
Oops. I forgot one thing, and
Yes.
I apologize.
We haven't taken a vote yet. Go ahead.
I was trying to get my mute button off. I wanted to do a finishes with the way we had started, which was a check-in, and I'd love to have you poll your colleagues as we go around the room to do a checkout with a word or phrase of how you are leaving today. So we have time to do that.
All right, we're going to skip Mrs. McQuinn since she... Go ahead, Mrs. McQuinn. You can go first.
I came in here in such a down mood. I am so appreciative to my colleagues and to Dr. Fenoy and to Dr. Fenoy's staff for making this so productive. Thank you.
Ms. Ayala.
I feel accomplished and hopeful and appreciative of everyone's comments today to make sure we align on this important work. Thank you as well, Ms. Bertakis, for your assistance. It was invaluable, and we really felt your input.
Ms. Pearl.
Thank you. So I am excited and grateful because we came in here from different places, wanting different things, and I think we really incorporated the diversity of our views, I'm hopefully achieving what Dr. Robinson wanted, achieving the other groups that we also wanted included. I feel very satisfied. I'm excited and just waiting to get the work started.
And I'm pleased that we all work together as a team to get this done today. I think we accomplished a lot, so thank all of you for your cooperation.
I'd just like to say something. I want to encourage you all to stop saying what Dr. Robinson wanted and to say what you want.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just want to say that was so fun. I enjoyed working with you all. I feel like we never get to do this, where we actually get to have conversations, and so that was great. And I feel, like Alex said, very accomplished. I'm very proud of the outcome, and I can't wait to see what the community has to say.
Mrs. Andrews?
And Mrs. Patakis, thank you so much for all that you're doing. I thank the staff for putting everything together. This was a great day of getting our thoughts together of how we should be as we move forward. I'm looking forward to actually beginning the implementation of showing these words into action. So today was a good day that we did come together and resolve what we truly want to be like in Palm Beach County for our children.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I remain hopeful. I think I'm more encouraged than I was at the start. Thank you for saying that, Dr. Fenoy, because, I'm going to speak my truth, but it is not about what I want. It's what our students need and how we need to lead. So actually we have a better community. But now I'm almost afraid. And I'm almost afraid that that we will respond to criticism by going back to our usual mode of operating. And so I'm going to be prayerful that that doesn't happen. Thanks.
And before we take a vote, let's thank Mr. Murray, the man behind the glass, for he always gets us set up, takes care. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.